Okay, good evening. Is my mic working? Okay. Good evening. I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. And I invite you all to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we would like to present our land acknowledgement. Julia? I'm not sure that my microphone is working.
This one.
Is that better? There we go. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Next, we'd like to present our land acknowledgement. And Julia?
The Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District would like to acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe, the tribe of indigenous peoples from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We would like to pay our respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit historical Massachusetts tribe territories to this day.
Thank you. Before we get started, we're going to start with citizens' comments. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and it's being live streamed on HWCam. Those of you who are on Zoom please know that once we are finished with citizens' comments, the Zoom link will be closed, but you can continue to watch on the live stream on HWCam. Okay. So what I'd like to do is get started with citizens' comments. I ask you to keep your comments, well, before we start, I just want to say I am appreciative of all of those that have written emails. We've gotten some really thoughtful feedback from the citizens, and it is always appreciated when people are willing to engage in this conversation. What I'd like to do, I think maybe we'll start with in the room. I'd like to ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And I realize I didn't actually appoint a timer. Anna, would you be willing to time us for 3 minutes? Again, here we ask you to just try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, and Anna will give you a signal when you're getting to that point. Okay, so if you are here present with us and you would like to make a comment, please come to the podium. Sure, step right up. Oh, at the podium, please. And please start by letting us know your name and where you live.
Is this on?
Can you test it one more time?
Check.
Yeah, I think so, yes, thank you.
My name is Peter Shibley. I live at 188 Main Street, around the corner from Bucher. I have 4 children that have gone through various different forms of the school program here in Hamilton-Wenham. I'm not sure that the comprehensive content of my comments is going to fit in 3 minutes, so maybe I'll just try to stick with the tone. But it's really about the masking policy that you guys have recommended. And it's very difficult to find specific data right now to Hamilton and Wenham because there essentially is no COVID situation in these 2 towns, and so it's not in print. And if any of you have it currently today, I would love to see it. I was unable to find it. But just quickly, I was able to see that as of today, there are 177 cases in the county of Essex. 0 deaths. There's a 75% vaccination rate for 1 shot and 65% for full vaccination. There are 19 hospitalizations, and 6 of them in the ICU, of which are all older citizens. That was the data that I could, and the reason I tried to find some of this stuff is because I didn't see any data in the report that you guys attached. And then, so I have a couple questions, and then I wanted to just leave a comment or two. June 19th, the DESE lifted the masking policy, if I read it correctly in the note that was sent out. What has changed since then in our area that would cause us to go back to a universal mask policy in the school? I have no answers. I would love to hear from somebody, because there really hasn't been a change in our area at all. In the country, for sure. In the southern states and in very low vaccination states, absolutely. Not here. July 30th, the Mass Department of Health, if other risks are present, we recommend you wear a mask. What are those other present risks today in the Hamilton-Wenham School District? Again, I can't find them. July 30th, the DESE, vaccinated students can remain unmasked. Pretty clear recommendation to me.
30-second warning.
Are you going to answer, or do you want me to finish?
No, I'm just giving you.
This doesn't count to my 3 minutes, right?
Nope. 37-second warning. Continue. I was just warning you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to answer me. Then I looked at the considerations comment, and it seems like you guys are stuck between a choice of a universal mask policy or an optional mask policy as being the only two directions you could go in. Why is it so difficult to verify vaccinations? I have a son who's leaving this school district, sadly, because of this and some other reasons. And
That's 3 minutes,
where he's
Mr.
going
Shipley.
to school, it's very simple that they just all had to verify their vaccination cards. Not an issue at all, especially in light of all the other forms we have to fill out. So I'm a little perplexed on why.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up, please.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm asking you to wrap it up,
The
please.
3 minutes.
Well, I'm sorry, but I mean, it's
No,
not.
the 3 minutes. The 3 minutes policy is an equity policy, so every single person gets 3
Thank you.
minutes, no matter what. Like
Can't
pro
finish.
mask, anti mask, whatever.
I can't finish my point.
Can you please wrap it up?
I would just, yeah.
Excuse me? Yeah. I would say, I can't give him the zinger because I have so many in here that'll exceed your time. So I guess, look, in a closing statement, I don't see any current evidence for a universal mask policy in our schools. I don't need to restate how dangerous and poor it is for the kids to learn in school with masks on. There was a distinction here that said social distancing.
Thank you.
Better for
Thank you.
education than masks.
Thank you.
Totally disagree. And I would like to suggest
Sir, I'm going to ask you to sit down,
a
please.
voluntary mask mandate.
Thank you.
This is too
Okay.
important. I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
for 3 minutes. It's just
Thank
too
you.
important.
Well, I know, and I'm sure other people
Julia,
also
Julia,
think
thank
that
you.
their
And I would like to
statements are
finish.
too important for 3 minutes.
Can
as
you
well.
please,
Sleepovers, parties, which are going to exist every day after.
sir, I am asking you kindly to please sit down. Thank you for your
I'm
comment.
gonna raise my hand again because I'm sure I'm not the only one in this conversation.
HW Cam, can you please increase the volume of my microphone?
Yeah, we can't hear Dana.
Can I have, are there any other citizens who would wish to speak? So I really appreciate everyone's comments. I am genuine in that. And I'm asking you to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, please. Okay?
I did Toastmasters, I got you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, I've been
She did
through
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, I got you.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, hi, my name is Yvonne Mimo. I live in Hamilton. I have 3 grandchildren in the school system. Please bear with my passionate attitude. I come from a place of love for children and love of freedom. First, I would like to point out that the FDA website states face masks should not be used in place of surgical masks to provide antimicrobial, antiviral protection, prevention, or reduction, end quote, because it's like throwing sand through a chain link fence. Viruses are too small to be stopped by a cloth. Also, the Taiwan University Hospital concluded that the use of N95 masks in healthcare workers caused them to experience low oxygen levels and high CO2 levels. So the masks that can help stop viruses are dangerous to your health by themselves. There's a lot more science to prove the ineffectiveness and dangers of masks. If we care about children, we will look at the science. Forcing masks on our children in schools is a major threat to their development. It ignores the essential needs of a growing child. The well-being of children and young people is highly dependent upon emotional connection with others. Masks create a threatening and unsafe environment where emotional connections become difficult. We would be harming our children with a mask requirement. The science does not support the need for it. In fact, some science says it's harmful. I also question the legality of such mandates. We are not in a state of emergency. The health departments and the school boards need to be careful not to overstep legal boundaries. That includes for immunizations and vaccines. I read the proposed COVID protocols, and all of this is draconian, to say the least. These are our children, and we need to protect the rights of the parents too. Remember the slogan, "My body, my choice"? At the least, there should be a choice. We have rights given by God, not by government. These rights are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Forcing children to wear germ-breeding, snotty, face-blocking rags on their face all day long, or on anyone's face for that matter, takes away our liberty and our happiness. These masks are not about safety. It's about something else. I, for one, will not stand down and allow this. I call it as I see it. Forcing children to wear masks all day is abuse, and it's an abuse of power. We will be raising a fearful generation. And remember what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next I'd like to see, Tom, do we have anyone on Zoom who would like to make a public comment? Oh, okay, I can go back to, we're gonna make sure everyone gets an opportunity. Just like every meeting, I'm not sure whether everyone here has been to other school committee meetings, but a school committee meeting, just as a point of education, a school committee meeting, like other government meetings in town, is a business meeting that takes place in public. And so we provide an opportunity for people to make public comment, but it is not actually a dialogue in the meeting. We're going to have a meeting here, and that's the way that. And so we're going to give an opportunity for people to speak, but it is not a public hearing. Okay, so I'm going to ask if there's anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment. Tom, is there anyone on Zoom?
Yeah, if you could, I'm just trying to set up the technicalities. Just give me 1 minute. If you could just connect from the screen.
Okay. So it looks like it looks like we have one more person in the room that would like to speak, and then I'm going to take a couple from Zoom, and then we are going to move on with our meeting. Yep. Sir, would you like to speak?
4 in the Zoom.
4 in the Zoom.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Dana, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I have to be honest with you, it's very hard for me to understand what you're saying because everything is coming in as muffled. And I don't mean that as disrespectful. I'm just being honest. And I can actually hear you because I've been a holistic health practitioner for now 25 years in this town. I've studied virology. I'm a university professor on well-being. I have a private practice 3 miles away. It's very upsetting when I hear you hyperventilating behind that mask to think that my daughters are going to be wearing a mask this year. We are not in a state of emergency. Do you understand how big a virus is? A virus is 200 to 400 nanometers in size. The smallest opening on a cloth mask is 5 times greater than that. Then when you go in here, or in here, it's up to 10 to 15 times greater. I know you've heard this before, but you have to understand the science behind that. It makes no sense to put a mask on our children. Viruses, we have 380 trillion of them. I teach this at the university level in our bloodstream. There are 10 to the 31 in the air, ocean, and soil. We cannot avoid viruses. Virus is a very important part of the bioadaptive process in the human body. Without them, none of us would have been born. A virus takes the father's mitochondria and keeps it from the ovum of the unfertilized egg. We have to understand that CO2 is a toxin meant to be expelled. You cannot rebreathe your own CO2 without amazing harm. The bloodstream does amazing work and works so hard to rid itself of CO2. Think about the globe, think about what's going on right now with the climate change. What are we saying? This is just common sense and critical thinking. We're saying the ozone layer, the earth, the atmosphere is being destroyed by high amounts of CO2. But yet we want our children to rebreathe that CO2 in their delicate atmospheres called their bodies. This is absolutely insanity. I do not understand what's going on. Why are we doing the same things we did last year when obviously last year did not work? Remember, we pay you. We are the taxpayer. And I do not want to subject my daughter to have to go to school and be muzzled. I think it's very outrageous when they have a 99.8% chance of surviving this virus, and they've never, ever transmitted this virus to one person in the world that we have scientific data on. A teacher or an adult or a parent. They do not do that. So please, I ask you all to use common sense and critical thinking and make this decision the right decision for our children and for our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comment. Tom, are we ready on Zoom?
Yes, we have Allison Jenkins.
Okay. Allison, can you please state your name and where you live? And then we look forward to hearing your comment.
Should be all set.
I thank you. I want to tell you though, for those of you in the school committee in the room, on the Zoom isn't actually zooming what's happening in the meeting. So I have to be watching it on TV and on the Zoom. So I just didn't know if you were aware of that. But my name is Allison Jenkins, 75 Plum Street, Hamilton. I'm here to speak regarding two topics on your agenda: the appointment of an interim superintendent and the high school handbook. It was not an easy decision to open up on camera with my experience with the district. However, I feel like you're in a precipice, and I hope you're looking for a strong, fair, approachable, and accountable leader for the sake of our youth and the role models we want for them. I no longer have children at the high school. However, both of my children attended the district K through 12. During that time, I interacted with Mr. Tracy. I would like to note that my daughter, during her academic career, had no disciplinary issues other than tardiness. While my daughter was attending the high school, she parked in the Miles River parking lot. The assistant principal, on one of his regular trolls of the parking lots looking into students' cars searching for infractions, found my car parked at the middle school. He then placed a boot, similar to what you get in Boston, on my car with a note saying, "Don't drive away," and a smiley face. My daughter saw the boot and went to the office and returned to my car with the assistant principal. My daughter told him not to search her mom's car, and they did anyway. They found an empty plastic bag that they thought, in their opinion, smelled of weed. They returned to the office where they called in the police. I asked the police to weigh the contents, and he said he could not because there was absolutely nothing in the bag. I explained to Mr. Tracy that it was a family car that I shared with my daughter and my adult son, who had a medical marijuana card. The next day, I got a call from the police asking for my son's personal information. The officer was trying to access the state's database to verify my son's card at the request of Mr. Tracy. I was horrified and told him the district cannot access an adult's medical records without the consent of the adult. At our meeting, I asked Mr. Tracy for alternatives to suspension for being suspended for an empty bag. I stated community service, she could wear a dunce hat, anything but a suspension that would affect her then chances for college. He adamantly refused any alternatives and suspended her with no evidence, just his own assumptions that the empty bag must be hers in our car. At her
Ms.
re-entry
Jenkins,
meeting,
that's a
Mr.
30
Tracy
second
purposely
warning.
gave me misinformation. When I questioned him to the misinformation, he
30-second
intentionally tried to, excuse me?
30-second
Excuse
warning.
me?
30-second warning for the 3 minutes.
Okay, he intentionally tried to intimidate me, moving an inch from my face. Do you want a leader in your district that doesn't follow the policies, instead make up their own procedures, someone who's looking to enforce the highest degree of discipline, who commits HIPAA violations, and who won't even publish or give out his direct phone number at the high school because he wants no interactions
I'm not sure she
or
can hear me,
voicemails
but we need
left
to wrap
for
it up,
him. And over
please.
the last 7 years, he still has not updated. I ask that you please poll your teachers.
So I'm not sure she can hear me, but
In your 3 minutes had expired. Are you ready for the next person?
sure. What, do we have 2 more people?
There's 3 more people with their hands raised.
Okay, so, and,
We would have Caitlin Kalange.
okay, Caitlin, we're ready to hear your comment.
Caitlin, you're all set. You can unmute.
I bet they can't hear you at all.
Hi, thank you. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak to you all tonight, and thank you for taking the time to hear us. My name's Caitlin Kalange. I'm a mother to 3 school-age children who will potentially be attending the Hamilton-Wenham schools during this coming school year, pending the decision that's made tonight regarding mandatory masking of our children in schools. We're moving to Wenham in September. This would be my children's first year in the school district. Last year, I was able to successfully homeschool all 3 of my children while I completed my final year of nursing school myself. I am currently a registered nurse and, most importantly, a mother. I believe that I have the proper education, training, and ability to make decisions for my own children's health and well-being. I would really like to ask you to consider making face masks optional and leave this decision up to each individual family. I know that you have received plenty of scientific data and information from other parents within this school district. I don't feel that I need to elaborate further in regards to how science supports children not being masked, especially for long periods of time. I'm prepared to homeschool my children again for this coming school year should there be a mandatory mask policy put into place. And I know plenty of parents within the school district who are also willing to do the same. I would like to remind each of you that without our children in your school district, you will not have jobs. There are many jobs that are being threatened right now due to mandatory vaccinations and masking. I'm not going to allow my children to be a part of that. This is not a decision that will come lightly for my family. My children want to go back to school. I want them to go back to school. They miss being around their friends. They miss their teachers. I loved volunteering in my children's classrooms and participating in their education. I believe that if you decide to make this mask policy optional for families, that supports every family. The families that want to mask their children have the ability to do so. And the families who choose not to, or whose children potentially have medical conditions or sensory conditions that make masking near impossible, you're still allowing them the opportunity for a public education. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I would just like to thank you for please considering making the masks optional for each family to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate the comment. And we have 1 more, is that right?
We had 2 more.
Is that a new person?
No, we always had
Okay,
4.
all right, so, because we can do 2 more, and then we need to move forward with our agenda. Who do we have next?
Agnes Verbote.
Okay, Agnes?
Agnes, you're all set to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
We have next.
Agnes Verbote.
Okay, Agnes. Hi, my name is Agnes Forbra.
Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We have next.
Agnes Verbote.
Okay, Agnes. Hi, my name is Agnes.
Sorry, Agnes, I have to, can you turn off any streaming that you have going on in the background and we'll restart you? And then we'll have you unmute again.
Hi, I cannot hear you, but hopefully you can hear me. My name is Agnes Barbara, and I have 3 children in the Hamilton-Wenham School District, and I would like to voice my support for the universal masking policy recommended by the superintendent. AEP, CDC, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire DPH all recommend universal masking. The science supports it. Infections are made by droplets, and masks stop them. Hamilton-Wenham schools are older buildings with limited ventilation. I work in the field. I'm an architect with indoor air quality experience, and I believe that the selective masking will not be sufficient to protect the children. I spoke with the children pediatrician. He said that selective masking is not does not provide necessary protection. And apart from the science and the recommendations, it is critical for inclusion for all kids, especially for kids who have to wear masks due to their health reasons or because of their health risks or their family health risks. It would be damaging to force these children to stand out from the crowd and face peer pressure over their health or disability limitations. We have an obligation to protect the vulnerable as well as all other citizens. Children under 12 are unable to be protected by the vaccines yet, and we need to collectively work to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. I appreciate the comment. And who's our last commenter tonight, Tom?
Last commenter is Victoria Harris.
Is that Victoria? Is that right?
Victoria.
Okay.
Harris. Yep.
Victoria, we're ready for your comment.
Victoria, you're all set to unmute?
Good evening.
You're all set to unmute?
Just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just have a few comments on the masks, some questions that I've asked many people. Just curious of why we're having this one-size-fits-all for all children. What was previously said, our children have a 99.9% chance of surviving this virus, and most of them already have robust natural immunity. I don't know why we're not talking about natural immunity. In the olden days, mothers would bring their children to an infected house who had measles or chickenpox to get natural immunity. It lasts a lifetime. Where did that science go? Nowhere. We were just ignoring it. We would not have survived 200,000 years without natural immunity. Do you know how many children have died in the past year with COVID? Per CDC, as of July, the number was around 397 for the year to date. Most of those deaths were with COVID, not from COVID. Most had underlying health issues, leukemia, cancer, diabetes, obesity. Do you know how many children die of unintentional accidents a year? Over 12,000. Most of them from car accidents and drowning. More children the age from 1 to 4 die from drowning than any other cause of death except birth defects. For children 1 to 14, drowning is the second leading cause of unintentional injury after motor vehicle crashes. What have we done for these children? Do we bar them? Do we bar swimming pools or baths? Do we get rid of the cars? Do we walk everywhere? No, because as parents, we decide what the risk-benefit ratio is for our children. In all actuality, as adults, we do this every day. We drive, we take a shower, eating alone. These are all risks that we have to weigh out every day. Why are we doing the same protocols as last year when they didn't work? As you know, repeating the same action over and over again is called insanity. There are double-blind, blinded, placebo-controlled studies out there that state that masks do not work. Even the CDC states it. I am happy to send you those studies. This is about our children's health, emotionally, physically, and mental health. I've been in the health business for over 20 years. We live it in order to give it, my husband and I. Why aren't we talking about health? Why aren't we talking about what we eat, think, and drink?
Victoria, 30 seconds.
Exercise, stress reduction, techniques, washing our hands.
We know as a fact that most of the people that died, continue to die, had at least 2 or more comorbidities: obesity, cancer, asthma. Masks were intended to be used in surgical settings, protection for the surgeon, nurses, assistants, and patient, for the surgeon to protect him from the bodily fluids and blood from the patient, to protect the patient from sweat, sneezes inside the body cavity. I beg you to do your own research. Please do not rely on government officials that flip-flop on recommendations. Wear 1 mask. No. Wear 2. No. 3 may be better. No, social distancing, 6 feet. No, 3 feet is okay in schools. We're up all of these recommendations. A mannequin study by the CDC came to us with 2 masks.
Thank you, Victoria.
The best recommendation. Where's that?
Thank you to everyone who chose to come this evening and to speak publicly. I appreciate it. And at this time, we are going to close down the Zoom, but again, you can continue to watch live stream on YouTube, HWCam, and we are going to move forward with our agenda. Thank you. So next on our agenda in new business, it is listed as anticipated vote on the interim superintendent. I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview. We, as a school committee, we had...
Everyone back here can understand you. Can you maybe take your mask off for 3 seconds and tell us what you're saying?
She doesn't want to take her mask off, so.
At this time, I am going to move on with the agenda. So...
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. I appreciate that. So, this body, we received 8 applications. We worked with our MASC representative, Dorothy Presser, to help us with the search for an interim superintendent. At a previous school committee meeting, we selected 3 candidates to be brought forward for an interview. Subsequently, 2 of those candidates withdrew from the search. We interviewed last evening Mr. Eric Tracy, and this evening, I think we've covered that was a quick process, what happened. This evening, I'm going to ask that we first have a motion, and then we'll have an opportunity for discussion and potentially vote on an interim appointment for superintendent. Jennifer?
I move that Eric Tracy be appointed interim superintendent of schools for the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District, subject to the successful negotiation of a contract of employment mutually agreeable to the candidates and the school committee and signed by both parties or their designees.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Julia. I am going to start off by saying, David, unless you would want to, because I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah, we are hiring a superintendent on an interim basis. We're not hiring an interim superintendent.
Correct. Thank you. And I'm actually really, it's an important point that the person that we are hiring, David is correct, would be the superintendent. The term is an interim term, but the person that gets hired, in this case, the motion on the table would be Mr. Eric Tracy, would in fact be, their title would be superintendent, and that is an important point. Thank you, David. I believe that the motion was written in consultation with MASC, that it needed to be written in a certain way, I believe.
I would imagine that we could just work that out in the contract.
I believe so. Great. Thank you. Thank you for your point. Well taken. Again, is there any discussion previous to a vote? Anyone? Okay. Hearing none, the motion is to appoint Eric Tracy. I'm not going to read the whole motion. It is specifically worded, but to appoint Eric Tracy to the position of superintendent on an interim term. All in favor? And the motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Tracy. Okay. So that feels like a whole meeting, but we have a lot more to go. Next on our agenda is to have the vote on the COVID mitigation strategies for the opening of school. And I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth Daniels.
Thank you. And what I'm going to do is just walk you through a slide deck that goes over the recommendation that is in your packet and available to the community, and then give you, additional information as it's been coming up, and hopefully get in front of some questions that you might have associated with it. So as you have in your packet, we are recommending a universal indoor masking policy for the start of school. Our goal is to keep our school community safe and to keep our kids in school. So as you know, there's been a fair amount of guidance that has come out regarding universal masking or masking policies in general. And there are some discrepancies between the different guidance that's coming out. The CDC and the American Association of Pediatrics are recommending indoor masking regardless of vaccination status. The DESE and Mass Department of Health is recommending that K-6 wear masks and unvaccinated students in grade 7 and above wear masks. And the Hamilton Board of Health recently met and recorded indoor masking as much as possible in public spaces. I thought that the committee would be interested in what is happening at the regional level. There's this conversation is happening in every school district in the state, and this information was just updated on a vote that occurred last night. So as of the end of the day yesterday, of the 25 districts in Essex County, 10 have voted to follow the CDC guidance around universal masking, and 15 districts are yet to vote, or the vote has not yet been reported to the media. So this week and next week, you're seeing a lot of school committees take this question up. So that is the latest information that I have from the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable. In terms of putting forth the recommendation for Hamilton Wenham, that was done in consultation with our lead nurse. It was done in consultation with the 2 public health nurses, one from Hamilton and one from Wenham. It was also consulted was the district leadership team and the HWEA, that is something that would be part of a MOA agreement. So what were the key considerations that we are looking at? What we see is and is of concern here and nationally is the escalation of the Delta variant and the transmission of that variant. That Delta variant can be transmitted by vaccinated individuals. We also see this year that the remote option that was available to families that had immunocompromised students or family members is not available this year. So those students will all be physically in our schools. One of the things that we know from last year is that the bigger impact on instruction was the physical distancing. And so with masking, that had less of an impact on instruction, and that gives us a little bit more flexibility with the physical distancing. We're not suggesting that we're not going to pay attention to that, but it gives us a little bit more room to work with that. And then in terms of a differentiated mask policy regarding people that are vaccinated and not vaccinated, operationally that is incredibly challenging. An example that I would give to the committee is if you picture a high school or a middle school corridor when kids are passing between classes, it is almost impossible to manage who would be vaccinated and who would not be vaccinated, and therefore who would need to wear a mask and then who wouldn't need to wear a mask. culturally, there's also a piece around what does that do in terms of some categorizing students and potential issues related to people that are wearing masks versus not wearing masks. So all of those types of things were considered. In terms of recommendations, we are recommending that you adopt the proposed face covering policy that has been provided to you in the exhibits. This policy is adapted from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees template. We are recommending universal indoor masking in our school facilities with an implementation date of Monday, August 23rd. We have some exceptions for that. When staff members are alone in their classroom or in a private office, that would be a time that we would not anticipate that people would need to be masked. And we know that there are some instruction that it's really critical that students are able to see the staff members' mouths. That can be phonemic awareness, that can be some social emotional types of instruction. And in those moments, if we have vaccinated staff and they can keep with that 6 feet, we would recommend that they take their mask off for the period of time in order to deliver that instruction. So those are our recommendations. I also wanted to offer some things that play into this question as well. So one of the things that occurred last March is that this committee voted to approve the district moving forward in engaging with the DESE pool testing initiative. The DESE testing program continues to evolve, and our school officials and staff have been engaging with DESE to understand more about what the program is going to look like. DESE is funding all of this, which is really good news. And they have an evolved approach that I'll talk about in just a minute. I want to let you know that we have applied for and have been accepted into the DESE program for the upcoming school year. So what the DESE program is now looking at, it has 3 different elements to it. The first is what we experienced last year, that routine COVID pool testing, that will continue to be funded by the state this year. We also, towards the end of last year, engaged in the rapid antibody, the antigen test, for students that would come to the nurse's office and have symptoms of COVID. The nurse was able to do a rapid test to see whether or not this student appeared to have COVID identifiers. That would continue. And then the new piece that is out there is what is being referred to as test and stay. One of the things that was very disruptive to students last year is if they were identified as a close contact, they needed to quarantine and miss instruction and be at home for school. What the test and stay program will enable is that any student or staff that is identified as a close contact would have the option of being tested with the rapid antigen test every day for 5 days and not have to not be in school. So that is an additional piece of the testing program that is now offered. So we are in the final stages. DESE is in the final stages of pulling all of this together, and we anticipate having information going out to parents on that next week. Physical distancing, I'm sure, is another question that is on people's minds. So again, with masking, we have a little bit more leeway around that. So for example, in a science lab, right, you might not hit quite 3 feet. It might be like 2.5 with masking, that we feel comfortable saying, you know what, you're gonna get and benefit for what's happening in that science lab is more beneficial than a certain amount of inches in terms of the physical distancing. Similar type of thing like tables in art classes, we can do a lot more as opposed to kids sitting in individual desks. So again, we're paying attention to physical distancing, but we're not setting any specific mandates around that. And then our plan for lunch is to get kids outside whenever possible, and that we would be following physical distancing when inside, when kids are eating without the mask. We know that's going to be important. And we will be as mindful and come as close to that 6 feet as we can. Each building is going to be different. They have a different setup. And what I would anticipate sending out to parents is that if you have a question about what lunch would look like in your school, because it varies a little bit from school to school because of the setup, we would ask parents to contact the principal and they can talk them through what that would look like. In terms of athletics, we would basically overlay this policy onto athletics programs. So anybody that is participating in outdoor sports, no mask would be required, as we would not be asking students to mask and outside. With the indoor sport, which this fall would be volleyball, we would ask students to be masked. And then the other piece to this is that we know that this situation continues to evolve, changes happen, and I would suggest that the committee be mindful of how you can maintain a lot of flexibility so that you can respond as the circumstances change. So that one of the things that you might consider is, do you want to have this as a standing policy at the second meeting of every month? But that can be something that you can continue to talk through. But I would recommend that the committee think about how you revisit this issue on an ongoing basis. The other thing that I would offer that may make some sense here is consider providing the superintendent the ability to act outside of the policy temporarily if there's an unanticipated significant change that happens at the state or federal level, or COVID changes rapidly. And I'll give you an example of why I think that might be a wise course of action. Last spring, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the governor announced that students no longer needed to wear masks outside. And we had a masking policy in place. And that evening, my phone was ringing off the hook from the principal saying, what do we tell parents in the morning? Because the parents just heard from the governor, students don't need to wear masks. And in that situation, the superintendent needs to make a quick call around, okay, let's handle it this way. And then that could always be revisited at the next meeting if the committee had any concern about the call the superintendent made. So that, I wanted to just put that out to you. And so what we would put forth to the committee for consideration is a recommended motion that you adopt the face covering policy as presented in the meeting agenda, that it become effective on Monday, August 23rd, and that you plan to revisit this on a regular basis. And then if the committee saw fit, you could make another motion granting the superintendent to temporarily act outside of that, given unanticipated changes that might happen. And so I will stop there and would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. So I am working really hard to make sure that any deliberation or even questions are under a motion. So I'm going to ask Jen if you're willing to make a motion, and then we'll have discussion and clarifying questions, if that's... Yep.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District School Committee adopts the face covering policy as presented in the meeting agenda, effective Monday, August 23rd, 2021, and plans to revisit this policy on a regular basis.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Anna. And now I would entertain, first let's start with clarifying questions. So this isn't really debate or discussion, just any clarifying questions that anyone has regarding the policy that's before us. Anna?
So is there any consideration that we would have vaccine requirements for sports? I know that Salem passed a mandatory vaccination or a masking policy unanimously earlier this week for high respiration activities, sports, chorus, and band. Is that something that you have considered? Is that something that is on anyone else's mind?
We have not considered vaccination policies across the board. that is something that the committee could consider, and we could look into that for you if you would like to consider that.
Thank you. Are there other clarifying questions regarding the mask policy before us? Michelle Horgan?
Mary Beth, are there tools that you know of that the state could provide with us that will help us guide us through this mask policy?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that has become available is what I would describe as a plug-in between our nursing system and the state immunization records, right? And so as you can imagine, every district in the state is trying to get this plug-in, so we are still about 3 or 4 weeks out to getting it operational. But what it does is it enables the nurses to pull who's vaccinated in the schools. And so what's most important about that is it gives us vaccination rates in schools. So we can see how many students and staff at the high school are vaccinated. What is the vaccination rate? We'll be able to see at the middle school, and when the vaccination becomes available for younger students, we'll be able to track that data as well. One of the things as you revisit this, that to me seems like an important data point around the percentage of students and staff that are vaccinated in making a masking decision. Also, another point that I think is going to be really helpful in terms of data is that pool testing data, right? How prevalent or not is the virus in our schools? Is there a policy or a way in which the committee could make a decision connected to that pool testing data? So those are what I see and what the team sees as 2 critical points of data that would be helpful to the committee in terms of making determinations about when to change the recommended masking policy.
But just as a follow-up, with that information available in 3-4 weeks, hopefully sooner, I would recommend that as a school committee that we revisit this every school committee meeting, not just the 2nd of the month. Every 2 weeks? Yep.
So, so just for a point of clarification, the motion itself simply says on a regular basis. So I'm hearing that you, as a school committee member, would be interested in revisiting it at every school committee meeting.
Yes, yep.
Okay. Which would fall under this motion. Okay. Unless you want to make them an amendment.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just making sure. Clarifying question?
Yes, sort of.
Okay, Anna?
Yep, sorry, thank you. So sort of in the same vein, I'm very intrigued by looking at those vaccination rates, because I think for me personally, I will feel much more comfortable about revisiting masking, knowing that there's a higher level of vaccination among students specifically. So to me, those things are very much related, especially as it relates to outdoor unmasked activities. I will confess, I personally would support an even broader mask mandate, especially for instances of elementary kids who are unvaccinated and they pile on top of each other at recess. There are actually instances where they're very close together, maybe not for 15 minutes, maybe 15 minutes throughout the day. Like, I'm still, frankly, a little bit nervous about the unmasked, unvaccinated kids in close contact. So I'll be curious to see how that evolves with the data and the testing. If we weren't doing the testing, I would feel even more uncomfortable with that. So I support revisiting this regularly. And I think as vaccination becomes more available to us, I personally think the committee needs to keep in mind those 2 things somewhat go together in terms of overall risk strategy. So I don't know. I do think we should define regular. I mean, I think for me, monthly is fine, but I would also support Ms. Horgan's suggestion that we go more often than that.
Thank you. I will say in a collegial way, Anna, that I think we've moved to discussion there.
Does revisit mean voting every single school committee meeting on it?
So my thought on that is that it is, and I will listen to the will of the committee, but I do think that Michelle Horgan's suggestion of perhaps having this on the agenda at every meeting may or may not mean that there is a vote at every meeting. It may be that there's no new information, or it may be that, and at any point, as this committee knows, at any point, especially if it is listed on the agenda, someone could call for a vote.
Okay, I feel comfortable.
So that would be absolutely, if we list it on the agenda, even if all it is an update that nothing has changed, a committee member could absolutely call for a vote.
I feel comfortable with that then.
Okay. Is there other discussion regarding the mask policy and the motion before us? Michelle Horgan?
I'm saying a lot, so sorry.
No,
I just
can you please speak into the mic? I'm actually having trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I know this is such an emotional and divisive topic, but I think we have to meet in the middle, and I think that the school committee revisiting this at every single meeting and checking in with the health professionals and what's going on in the world. We know what happened with the Delta variant in UK and India, where it dropped off. So if that were to happen here, we could quickly, I don't want to use that word, the P word, the pivot word that we used last year, but we could quickly adapt to service and to meet the needs of our students at those that are vaccinated at the 9 through K levels. So I just feel as a community and as a school committee, we can get through this and meet some compromises. Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion? Anna?
I have a question not specific about masking, but about general mitigation strategies.
Can we do this? Well, maybe there's no other place for it. I'll ask. Go ahead, ask a question.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep, go ahead.
Are we planning to bring back any of the tents outside to help facilitate outdoor lunch, even on a rainy day, or outside activities, even on a rainy day?
Yeah. So in talking with our leadership team, at the middle level and the high school level, they both expressed a need to continue to have the tents. At the elementary level, they said that for the most part, kids really didn't eat under the tents. They liked being outside beyond the tents. So they did not recommend putting tents back. So we will have a tent back at the front of Miles River Middle School, where kids will be eating lunch outside. And there will also be a large tent outside the high school, particularly related to the music and performing art classes, to give them a safe space to conduct their classes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Looks to me like we're ready to move to a vote. Okay. The motion is before you. All those in favor? All right, and the vote is unanimous and the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the vote for the revised 2021-2022 school committee meeting schedule. Mary Beth, do we have an exhibit to pull up? I know we all have it.
Sorry, Dana,
Yep,
quick point of order. Did you want to have discussion
you know what,
about
I'm very sorry.
authorization?
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate you being here. And yes, I'm so sorry that we actually had the second motion. Exactly. I'm sorry.
Let me 1 second, I'll just take me.
I will, when we get that back up, I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make it. Thank you very much.
You want Jen to make it?
Jen, are you willing to make that motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
I move that the committee grant the superintendent to temporarily act outside of the face coverings policy if there is a significant unanticipated change in state or federal mask guidance or COVID conditions.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by David. All right. Is there discussion? Anna?
I'm generally supportive of this because I think the example Ms. Bagno cited is a good one. We just don't know what's going to come before us. But I will say that in general, I have some hesitancy to deferring our authority to the superintendent, however well-intentioned. So I think to me, the most important words there are significant and unanticipated, especially with the idea we're going to be revisiting it. So I don't want to defer our authority entirely because I think it is our responsibility to the public to do that. So I just want to sort of point that out, that I'm a little bit hesitant, but willing to give it a go with the idea that we can always rescind things if we change our mind, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I'm gonna take my turn to say that in discussing this and looking at this, just to be clear, and to Michelle Horgan's point, it can it can, and in the situation in which this were to have happened, I would anticipate that at the next school committee meeting, it would be revisited if this were to have happened. And as COVID taught us, sometimes the world is completely unanticipated, and there could be a potential situation in which we called an emergency school committee meeting. We have the capability to do that if something more urgent were needed. So, other discussion on this? Okay, looks like we are ready to move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the bottom of the screen? That is 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1, and the motion passes. Okay. Next on the agenda, as I was saying, is a vote to revise the 2021-2022 school committee meeting schedule. You all have that on the exhibit, and you will see, Mary Beth can speak to it, but it is, it's an addition of a meeting on Thursday, February 10th, 2021.
22?
Oh, it should be 2022, correct. Thank you, Anna.
Is this related to approving the budget within the timelines?
Michelle, can you speak into the microphone?
This is related to the approval of the budget with the advance notice of the town meeting. Of course, we do not have confirmation of the town meeting date yet, but in anticipation that it will be the first Saturday in April, we needed to add this.
I'm curious, these are all Thursday dates. The vote,
Correct.
we voted in all Wednesday dates back in June.
No, we voted in Thursday.
We voted for Thursdays.
David, there was a meeting afterwards where we changed and voted it onto Thursdays.
All right.
Is there discussion regarding the February 10th, 2022 date, adding that to the calendar? Or is there any other information you'd like to give us, Mary Beth, on that?
When is vacation?
No, the only change here
I'll ask
again is that Thursday, February 10th date, and it is based on, as Michelle noted, that if you look at the timeline for passing the budget, the committee is going to need an extra date.
So,
and also, the other piece to bear in mind is that the town meeting dates are not yet established. So the committee may need to come back at another time and adjust the calendar if there is a major change. We are making the assumption of the beginning of April. If that changes, the committee calendar may change specifically related to its budget process.
Mary Beth, I heard a clarifying question. Do you happen to, can you pull up when February vacation is?
Sorry, I had it printed, but
It's the following week.
bring it with
Okay,
me.
that's fine.
February vacation is the
February
following week.
vacation is the following
Okay,
week.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You get it?
Yep.
21st?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move to a vote? Okay. All those in favor, actually, we did have a motion, or we did not?
No.
No, we did not. Jen, would you be willing to make a motion?
Yes. I move that we accept the 2021-2022 school committee meeting scheduled as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Michelle Bailey. All in favor?
Do we need to fix the Scrivener's error?
Oh,
What are we doing?
I think we'll call it a Scrivener's error. It's a Scrivener's error. We'll call it a Scrivener's
Noted.
error. Okay,
Noted.
all in favor? That is 6 in favor, all opposed? 1 opposed, and the motion passes. Okay. Okay, next on the agenda is, I think, Mr. Tracy, I believe, is going to present to us the 2021-2022 handbook.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present our handbook so that we can get it in place for the beginning of the school year. Certainly, everybody's had, I think, the opportunity to take a look at it. We tried to, although messy, tried to simplify everything so you could see what was deleted and what was changed. And went back to last year and took a lot of the feedback that we received last year from many members of this group, tried to integrate some of that feedback. Worked with our attorney, district attorney for special education, and they were able to remove some language that in some of our sections of our handbook, and they were also fantastic at helping us to import and add in the correct versions of the legalese that's required. There are many parts of the handbook that are required to be published in the handbook, so they were really good about going back through the entire thing and making sure we had some all those dots, T's crossed and I's dotted. And I think the more important thing was they also went through some of the little things and said, consider this language, it's redundant, or this is not something that belongs here. So that was helpful as well. We also had the school council look at it on 2 separate occasions, most recently just before this meeting, because we just got it back from the attorneys the week before that, so we wanted to make sure that that approval process was completed before that. And we also had a number of our people within the facility go through it and read it, and as you know, you're always finding a missing space or a period or a comma, so we've done that as well. And certainly the book you have in the agenda tonight is not the final copy. We have to go back and pull out all of those strikeouts, clean up the formatting, and make the book presentable to the public.
Thank you. Again, to follow the format, there is a motion there, and I would ask that prior to our discussion, we make the motion, if you're willing, Jen. It's actually up on the screen.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the Hamilton Wenham Regional High School 2021 to 2022 handbook as presented.
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan. All right. So just to structure this conversation, I'm going to really try to ask you, I promise that we will have room for discussion. I would like first to have people ask clarifying questions regarding either the process, which is listed right at the beginning, which Mr. Tracy just reviewed a little bit, the process of the handbook, or any other questions that are just clarifying questions regarding the handbook itself. Jen.
On page 12, under the graduation requirements, in the last bullet point, it says additional semester of either. Either what?
Good point. It's actually either of the 2 above.
Okay.
So I can add that in.
Can we add that in?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And my other question was on page 24 in the plagiarism policy. Direct copy, it's the first bullet point. Direct copying of text from a book, article, internet resource, or another student's work. That's only plagiarism if it's not cited. And I think we need to make that very clear.
I think we had this conversation, I think, a couple years back. If you go up above in the paragraph, under another person's words, ideas, or thoughts, we tried to capture it there. But we can certainly clarify it if you think that makes better sense.
It's just that proper citation is in the other 3 bullet points below.
Yep. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other people who have specific, that was, first of all, Jen, I want to compliment you. Those were excellent examples of specific clarifying questions. Anyone else have clarifying questions? Julia.
So my clarifying question is not really about the handbook, but it's about who wrote it. I think there's a lot of misconceptions in the community that the school committee has written this handbook. While we certainly are obviously advising on it and voting on it and providing feedback, can you just talk more about the student council? And I mean, we assume that everyone knows the process, the school council, I'm sorry, and just about the process, just a 30-second primer.
The reality
I just received a lot of questions personally about
it. Absolutely. The reality of it is the handbook is one of those things that was some of this language was probably written 10 years ago, and each year continues to roll as groups request additions. So for instance, at the high school in the past few years, we've gone with trying to give the kids in the student government opportunity to review and pick an area that they think we should update. They've done that 2 years in a row, and that's been helpful. They send that information to the school council. Staff, faculty, same opportunity. We send an email out if you have any suggestions for change. It also happens during the school year when we run into an issue and we say, whoops, that's something we got to look at. We'll make note. So we'll do those updates usually in March of the current school year. By April or so, we're looking at it with the school council, and it's a lengthy document, so we just kind of give it to them and say, review it, take a peek at it, and then give us some feedback, and then usually by June we have it approved. But because of this year, we wanted to have it approved by the attorneys. There was a much longer timeline because we had to wait till they were ready, and they were also reviewing, I think, other handbooks within our district. So it's generally an open process. I've had things come up during the school year. I've had suggestions from parents. I've had we try to get the kids involved. I think it's important for the kids to have a voice, and certainly then the school council will organize it, put it together. Generally, it's me doing the kind of the editing, typing as we go, and then the draft will come here for kind of the final checkoff.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to add a clarifying to Julia's clarifying, which is, can you just share with us who composes the school council? What type of people are on the school council?
Sure. So the school council is a group of volunteers, and it is comprised of teachers, parents, students, and sometimes business members when we can get one to be on there. We've had one up until last year. We did not have a business member in the community, but generally I try to get 2 or 3 of each. Often we get more kids than adults because they have so many commitments. They have, oh, I got to go to sports today. So we try to make sure that we can try and get at least 2 kids with us at all times. And then in the fall, when kids leave, so 2 of our kids who are seniors, they graduated, those seats will be open. We put that out to the students and say, let us know if you're interested, and then we'll put it into the student government to determine who fills those seats. And there's not a whole bunch of people running up to join the group, but it's a fantastic group. I appreciate their time. They spend a lot of time reviewing things and kind of helping us to even word things or even giving us some feedback from the community that we may not know about. So it's a good group.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other clarifying questions?
I just want to add that as a parent of high schoolers for 11 years, I've always seen this as the AAA trip ticket from those before navigation, that this is, as a parent and a student, this is what you need to do to go from, point A to point B. And the administration was never one to be punitive in a way that was going to take us off course. It was always one that would help us through a pothole if one existed. This is not an ironclad, throw the book at the kids. This is here to help you. And in my experience as a parent, never once have I viewed it as punitive or draconian, just another helpful tool to help all of us get our students where they need to be. So.
And that's certainly our intention, and some of it's required to be in there. Some of it is really necessary when you get into those tight times to be able to say, here's how we're going to do this, and including if it's something like if you're investigating a bullying or harassment issue, you can go right to this handbook, call the parents or kids and say, here's what we're going to do, here's the process, and they can pull it right up too. So it's been helpful in those instances as well.
Michelle, I'm going to say the same thing I said to Anna. I think you moved us a little in towards discussion. And are we ready to move that way, David, or do you have a clarifying question?
I just have, under gambling, it says students gambling of any type, including sports betting and card playing, is prohibited at the high school. Does that mean we can take sports bets here at Bucher, or do we probably want to move that throughout the whole district?
Yeah, we could. I mean, it's the high school handbook, but yes, we could definitely.
It's jokey, but I also know of plenty of middle schoolers with, fantasy football accounts.
Could they play cards that's not betting, though? Could they play cribbage?
What's that? Well, I mean, it's
Yeah, I
just
hope
here.
so.
It specifies the high school.
Right, it's a,
Leave it pool everywhere else.
right, I believe the intent is that you can't be betting on a card game.
Right.
But
Correct.
we can clarify that.
Just for clarification, though, I actually really appreciate that question, and I wonder, too, it is the high school handbook, right? So it may not speak to anything about Bucher,
Yeah,
right?
but it's also specifically just that grounds. I mean, if you just include
Yeah,
it
it's
for the
everywhere.
district, you're covering all your bases.
Absolutely.
We can do that. It's easy.
Especially like since most of our sports are off campus.
Oh, yeah.
Softball. All right, now to open up for any, oh, I'm sorry, do you have another clarifying question? You ready to move to discussion? Discussion, okay, Jen.
I have a concern over the disciplinary consequences of illegal drug possession, use, impairment, or under the influence. Drug use is a medical as well as mental condition, and we're treating it here like a crime. The first time you get caught doing something stupid as a kid, you're gonna potentially face expulsion. I think we need to put some interim steps in there that allow the child, or high school student in this case, to recognize they made a mistake and receive appropriate treatment before we move up to the point where we're throwing them out of school for a significant amount of time.
So this actually comes up in the language that was added by the attorneys. It's actually reflective of the law and the authority. The way the attorneys worded it for us was, it is part of the law that has to be published in the book. So the expulsion process, chapter 37H, 37H and a half, those are required to be published in the book, and they're really the expectation of what processes that the school system follows when there are incidents. Now, the realities are, we generally don't jump to expulsion. There's opportunity to say, in that policy, 1 to 10 day suspension. We look at all of the other factors of an issue with a student. There's all kinds of mitigating factors that come up with different kids and different families, and sometimes it's a minor offense, like I didn't turn my prescription meds in to the nurse and I've been carrying them all day. That's something realistically a mistake. Not that, nobody's trying to pull the wool over their eyes and selling prescription drugs. So that's where it comes from. It comes from our attorney to include that language so that we have the full spectrum of what's allowed in the law, from zero, doing nothing, all the way to the expulsion process. And I'd look back, I don't think I've expelled a student here.
Is it possible, though, to set it up like you set up the plagiarism violations, where you include the expulsion language, but you also indicate to students that this is not the most likely thing to happen to you when you screw up for the first time? It just seems very harsh.
Yeah, it is meant to draw a line. I mean, these are things we don't expect to happen at our schools. Weapons, drugs, alcohol, any of those things are really places where we want to draw a firm line. And I think it's important to make sure people understand that there are consequences. And again, if you go back through our records, generally, and I said this yesterday, we want to work with kids and families. I want kids to make mistakes with us so that we can help fix them and help remediate them. Because there also is a piece in here where we help to try to connect kids with counseling or rehab or therapy if they need it as part of this process. And that also goes for in school too. If people don't have the ability to do that outside of school, we have people in school that can help work with them as well. Our school counseling staff is really good at stepping up on that. So.
Other discussion? Anna? Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle, I missed you. Michelle?
Just to follow up on that, can you discuss how you make the decision? Because this says, it can be up to this. Can you talk about how you make the decision on what the consequence will be? Sure. Certainly, number of offenses comes into play, We always look at age. We look at, a freshman who's been in the building for three weeks who gets
caught, you know, with some type of an illegal substance, that's not something you would expect to slam a student out the door for. I personally don't think expulsion is a great answer for almost everything in school. I think it's important for us to keep the kids in school as much as possible. So we do work with that. Brian and I always talk about, you know, where's the kid at? How's the family working with them? We lean towards, you know, is the family involved? Sometimes I have kids come in for hearings for discipline and you don't get a parent. Oftentimes you might get one, or sometimes you get both. So we try to weigh that out and see where we can help the most. We look at their academic record, we look at their attendance records. We try to use those to our advantage to say, okay, you know, this particular student's been out of school 31 days. They do not need any more time out of school. What else can we do? And that's when we take advantage of in-school suspension and keep them in school and working. We take a look at their special ed status. That's important as well because that triggers a whole separate set of rules outside of the disciplinary policy that we have to follow. So we try to look at it from multiple angles.
And then, I don't know if this is a question or just a comment that I will raise any time I am here. The handbook states that you need social studies credits to graduate. However, the high school puts in place that you must take very specific courses, and I find that to be not aligned, particularly where we offer a wide variety of social studies courses. It does not, to me, make sense why the only ones that count for graduation are 3 specific ones.
Right, and that's pretty specific to what DESE requires us in the frameworks. It's really not a choice for us to make, just like the civics project now that's added on top of that. Now kids have to do the 3 specific years of history, social studies, but they also now have a civics project on top of that, and that again comes from the state. It doesn't come from us, it comes from the state frameworks. And that's one of the things Kristen Borges stays really tight with. She's extremely in deep with the frameworks as they've constantly been changing and rolling for the past 3 years now as they move towards the possibility of testing via MCAS. So we really are trying to follow the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks in any of these instances.
Anna?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tracy. So for all the things that have changed, I have a number of things that are still concerning to me that are unchanged.
Okay.
Some of which I noted last year, so I was sort of looking forward to seeing the changes. But this is sort of more maybe a typographical thing, but the table of contents is inaccurate just in terms of the page numbers. So maybe when you strike out and look at it, I would just make sure you draw attention to correspond page with page.
Yep. It's automatically generated, so once we pull everything out, it gets regenerated once we clean everything back up.
Okay.
So it would be
yeah, but that's something to note. So one of the things that I noted last year that has not changed at all, and I think actually something the policy subcommittee did has made it even more complicated. Throughout this document, I have 8 different listings of protected classes. On pages 1, 9, and 19, we have one group of words. Students are protected on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, disability, and homelessness. That's one version. On page 32, we narrow it to race, color, gender, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, or disability. On page 33, we conflict within ourselves. Then it says sex, race, color, national origin, religion, age, disability, gender identity, or sexual orientation, which is not correct in terms of inclusion. Those are not like equivalents. There needs to be a comma there. Then it says see Appendix B. But then when you go to Appendix B, the only items identified there are race, color, national origin, sex, disability, or age. I won't get into all of it. Page 51 has a different group. Page 58 has a different group. Page 61 has a different group. And I think confounding all of it is that appendices B, E, and F are related to bullying and harassment discrimination, but those don't conform to the new A section of the policy that we adopted in May that takes effect in September. I'm specifically looking at policy AC, ACA, ACAB, and ACE. And ACAB is the new federal Title IX policy that came out last year. We had to have 2 or 3 almost emergency meetings on that. So we're now in conflict with the new harassment policy, which interestingly, and I'll read this last group because this is the most sort of another version of list. Protected classes are race, sex, gender identity, creed, for the first time appears here, color, national origin, sexual orientation, religion, which could be argued to be the same as creed, marital status, or disability. So once again, I find that, like, that needs to be standardized. And I would like us to spend some time with that.
Sure.
I still take issue with the graduation dress code. I like the fact that you changed it to reflect current practice, which is that the kids vote. My problem with that is when you defer to a student vote, and I've only been to 2 graduations, so maybe I'm wrong here, but left to those devices, students are still gravitating towards very stereotypical gendered norms. Both graduations, most of the girls wore white, most of the boys wore blue, which I would argue was simply giving a vote to entrench those ingrained biases. I would actually advocate here that we eliminate the potential for exceptionalism and say we alternate blue, white based on the alphabet, gender notwithstanding. So I find there's still an ingrained bias in the dress code, even though I like that you've made it practical. I share much concern about the zero tolerance, and I appreciate that legally we have to include that language, but if there is indeed a ramp up, I think the ramp up needs to be called out, and there's no real notion of that here because the language is very clearly on the first offense. So if that's not true, then I would think we should build in what happens before. I also think the order of operations is wrong. I wouldn't start, your description of a kid's been out of school for 31 days, now we bring them back. I would invert that. I think it's a more holistic way to look at it. If you look at abuse and substance counseling, you look at disciplinary status, I would say on the first offenses where you start with in-school suspension and counseling and treatment, the question I would ask is, what's going on in the student's life that's led to this situation?
Right.
Are they experimenting? Are they bored? Are they unsupervised? Do the parents have a drug problem and they have easy access? I think instead of swinging the hammer at the kid, I would take a holistic view and say, what's happening? So the fact that the way it's written starts at that most punitive, I have concern about that. And then there's...
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yep.
I'm wondering, are you anticipating that Mr. Tracy is going to respond? Because if so, that's a long
I only
list
have
for
one more
him.
point, actually.
Okay. I'm just trying to imagine trying to respond to each of those.
Yep, I got it.
Go ahead.
And then the last one was, I think it is actually a point of redundancy. I think it's something that probably could be duplicated. But it also gets me back to sort of this inclusion bullying environment, and particularly in light of an incident that happened last year, which I think perhaps we were in violation of our own handbook on it. So on page 29, there's specific discussion of cyberbullying. And the language, the first bullet says acts of bullying, which includes cyberbullying, are prohibited. And it talks about on school grounds, which makes sense. But the second bullet reads, at a location, activity, function, or program that is not school related, through the use of technology or an electronic device that is not owned, leased, or used by the school district in the school, if the acts create a hostile environment at school for the target or witnesses, infringe on their rights at school, or materially and substantially disrupt the educational process or the orderly operation of the school. If you look at that bullet and the section directly below it, the language is literally verbatim. So I think either the bullet needs to change or the language below it needs to be removed. But it led me to an interesting realization about the school committee meeting last May, which happened, and there was aggressive homophobic sexist language in the HWCAM chat. And my recollection of the time is that Mary Beth Banos said we couldn't do much about it because it happened outside of school at a non-school event. It was HWCAM, it wasn't us. I would actually argue upon reading this now, our handbook very much includes that behavior. So moving forward this year, if that happens again and we have knowledge of outside bullying, it clearly is affecting the students at school, even if it takes place on TikTok or Snapchat or Facebook or whatever. So I think I'm glad there was a duplication here because it made me really read it several times. And then I thought, well, we're not following our own handbook. So as we move forward, I want to correct the duplication, but we need to enforce that policy because the cyberbullying is only getting worse, and we need to recognize it affects the school.
I'm going to give Eric an opportunity to respond. If you're...
Those are all my questions, though. I'm done.
Yeah.
I think the issue around the status is, so if you start on page 1 and you have one version and then you have 4 or 5 other versions throughout, like one of those you noted came directly from our attorneys, directly from the law. So that's different than what we have in some of our policies. So that's kind of a weird dynamic that I guess I have to figure out where it makes sense to make that change. I can't go in and rewrite the law that they give us to put in there. So I think it maybe go back and figure out, you know, even at a district level, like here's what we're using, and that goes out to everybody. I think it's important to do that. It's not something that we've done, and I think that would make it easier for people to understand, like, we have this specific language and it has to be here, 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 and here, and that would be helpful for not only, I think, this handbook, but for other handbooks and documents within our district. And certainly, well, I would guess if we scanned other documents in the district, we'd come up with the same issues.
I'm sure we would. And those new policies, those A-section policies have, like I said, there's 4 specifically that talk about those issues that might be really helpful. That we did, I think that vote was also legally binding, right? The policy vote?
Okay.
So one thing that I would offer, that when the attorney looks at this handbook, one of the things that they look at are what is the compliance language that the district needs to have in its handbook. And as much as we'd all like to think that everything is aligned nicely, there are times where different groups do not speak well to another. And when we have our review, which will actually happen this spring, they're going to go to certain parts of the handbook, and we have to have the exact language they are looking for. So some of it is not necessarily alignment here, right? But amongst different agencies and amongst different requirements, do they have a different set of language that they need to tick that box? So I wanted to make people aware, and without going through each individual piece, I can't speak to if that's the case under each piece, but I can tell you that part of the attorney review is we have legal requirements to have certain specific language in our handbook, and the attorney goes through and makes sure that the language appears the way that it needs to appear in order for us to be in compliance with state regulations.
Do we have, I think, more discussion, Julia?
I would say that I agree with Anna about alternating the blue and white for graduation, only because our students that identify as non-binary and might not choose to select white or blue. And I think gender is a construct, so that's just my personal opinion. But I want to be really clear about what happens if we submit these edits, what happens if we vote against it, and what happens if we vote for it. Is there a way to pass it and have these edits be considered, or what is the next way forward here?
So the one thing you don't want to do is start a school year without a handbook. I think it's important from day one, but certainly we can make these edits and adjustments that we're talking about here tonight, and there's some certainly really easy ones and some a little more complex, but we can do that before publishing it out to people in a week and some change.
Could I just offer another possible way forward? If the committee members can submit the items that they have concerns about, so that Mr. Tracy has a full list, and he can bring it to the school council, right? Because that group has done a lot of processing, and it would be difficult for them to hear all of a sudden all that work has been changed without understanding and having a chance to give potentially you feedback around that. So, and to Mr. Tracy's point, we need a handbook for the start of school. You do not want to start a school year without a handbook. So I have some concerns about the timing here and the fact that it is August 18th, and the fact that we need to have something published. And it is my understanding, Eric, that it is possible at some point during the year if an edit needed to be made, it could be made. Is that correct?
That's what I was just going to say. It's certainly, you're able to kind of make these quick changes, get the school year started, and that's the first order of business for the school council in the first September meeting.
Yes.
To go back through, and then
Okay.
just send a revised one back to this group.
And just a quick clarifying question for Dana.
Absolutely.
At any time, a committee member can submit this to put on the agenda to discuss.
To
or no?
put to, I'm sorry.
Like if we decide, if we have further problems or issues with the agenda, I mean, with the handbook, is this something we can revisit or no?
Well, I mean, obviously, anything can get put on the agenda,
Right.
but I think, go ahead, Eric.
Through the chair, thank you. I think it's important to stay with the process.
Yeah, sorry, Michelle.
The process that we have. So if there's an issue, it would be good to say to me as the principal, hey, there's an issue that's coming up in the handbook, and you take a look at this with the school council.
Okay.
That's generally what we do with everybody else. I think it's good to keep that flow.
Sure.
Because I think no matter what, the school council still needs to be involved in that final approval process by statute.
Sure. I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah. no,
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Michelle Bailey?
I just want to clarify, the role of the school committee and the handbook is to make sure that the handbook aligns with our policies. So if we are making a recommendation about graduation gowns, that is not within our authority because we do not have a policy around that. So it's only
But our
within our
goals, though.
authority to make sure that the handbook is aligned with our policies. It's not in our authority to recommend what is in the handbook.
Thank you, Michelle. And that is, I have also learned that, and I've done some research, and that is accurate, that this is the reason that we had Eric explain the process about the school council. And to that point, I think Mary Beth's suggestion, I know that there were some questions regarding policy here. And those, we could put those forward. And I think, Michelle, that it is important to remember that there may be things that we ask questions about, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is, that was the school council's and the principal's purview.
Okay.
Is there more discussion? Anna?
I'm sorry, Mr. Tracy, did you have your hand up? Were you going to say something else?
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I guess my concern about the motion is written, like, a lot of these changes, that's not what the motion says, for one. So, I mean, I don't, as strictly speaking, as a matter of process, I don't like saying, as presented, wink, wink, but when you change it. Like, I personally can't in good conscience vote for something.
You could make a motion to amend if you choose to.
Right, no, I know. So that concerns me. I do also, and I think this is not going to be resolved tonight, but I think the question of, the dress code or the policy or not, we, the committee, are setting the tone and talking about goals and harassment and how students are being viewed. And like, I just went through literally 2 pages of all the ways that those things are manifest in words. So it's perplexing to me that we're being asked literally to rubber stamp a document. The first time we have seen it, we've now given a variety of suggestions and things that are concerning. From a higher level authority, I am concerned that there is embedded sexism in this document, and I'm being asked to rubber stamp through it. And this idea that we have to start the school year with it, that's fine, but procedurally, it's very frustrating to have a document presented to me with, well, you have to say yes tonight. You don't have a chance to say no. And this was the first time this body has deliberated on it, and some of the things I've cited, I literally cited them 1 year ago, and they haven't changed. So I don't like the rubber stamping, so I feel like I do want to think about an amended motion because I'm not comfortable passing it as presented. But I'm sensitive to your point that we don't want to start the school year without a handbook. But my comment to that would be that next time we need to have a first reading and a second reading or something, because you're never going to get a rubber stamp yes from me. Never. No, I mean, it's just, it won't happen.
So if I may, I think that I think this was perhaps what Mary Beth was suggesting, would be, and I'm, again, just a thought, we may decide to approve the handbook as presented this evening with the contingency that feedback will be provided to the school council via Eric Tracy, and that after their next opportunity to meet, that we would receive a revised copy, or a revised, right? Is that what you were trying to get at?
In the first 30 days of school, so.
Great.
That's a requirement.
Mary Beth?
I just, I do want to echo the piece around the committee is really looking at policy, right? And so what I would anticipate would happen in the process is that the feedback, for example, about the graduation gowns would go to the school council. The school council may have a different perspective on that, but what I think I'm hearing you say is you would like the council to consider that in their thinking about that. But that the school council would ultimately own that decision because it's not policy. So unless you wanted to make that a policy, the feedback, I think, makes a lot of sense to the school council, that the committee has offered this feedback on the book, but it would be that council that would make decisions related to the handbook. In your job is to make sure that what we have in the handbook aligns with the policy.
Thank you. At this point, I would entertain either a motion to move to a vote or a motion to amend if someone has one of those.
Did we not already have a motion to approve?
We had a motion.
That was seconded?
We do, and I heard indication that people might want to make an amendment. What was that? I'm sorry.
I would move to vote on the motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So we are voting on, seconded by Michelle Horgan. We are voting on whether we are going to vote on this. So a yes vote would mean we would move to a vote without further discussion. A no vote would mean that discussion would continue. Okay. All those in favor? 2 yes. All those opposed? That is 5 opposed. The motion fails.
I move to amend the motion.
Anna?
Thank you. I'd like to amend the motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to amend the motion to add language that it is approved as presented, subject to further revision by the school council at the earliest opportunity, and secondary review by the school committee at the meeting thereafter.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Jen Carr. My concern about that is that puts us in a tight time frame in terms of that's putting it on a specific agenda. So I'm a little concerned about being sure that it has to be on a certain agenda.
The
David?
amendment was for the agenda after they make the
Correct.
change. So there's no timetable.
No, but it does mean that, I don't know when they meet, but when they do, it would mean that we would have to have it at the next meeting, which may or may not be the optimum meeting just in terms of our own work plan.
I don't think you can get a more open-ended amendment. I really don't.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if the school council met, let's say on September 30th, we would need to review it then at the next meeting, and it is possible that it would be better with our work plan to review it 2 meetings later, let's say. That's my concern.
Well, I mean, I think if the impetus is to get an approved handbook in place before the start of school, and also that we have some changes we would like to see at least considered, but also as soon as possible, because the whole point of revising it, I mean, in my mind, the goal here is that as soon as possible in this school year, we have a handbook that everybody likes. So I mean, we could amend it again to say within 2 meetings, but I think that defeats the purpose, because now all of a sudden, now we might be in November and then December, and then we might as well wait till next year.
Just a concern.
Noted.
Okay.
And can I also add something?
At this point, I would like to encourage us to move along, and I will say that when we get to this again, if this were to pass, I will encourage us to be really thoughtful about making it a clear up or down vote when we get to it again. That is my discussion. Julia?
So just two clarifications. One is we submit concerns to Mr. Tracy, okay, in writing. And the second piece is those concerns may or may not be taken into account.
Correct.
Right? And that's fine. I'm just trying to clarify that.
Correct.
Okay, so it's like we'll take it into account, we'll evaluate everything, and then we'll bring the revised handbook to you with or without, or, you know, however we've deemed it, and then we get to decide whether we approve it or not.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Okay, so I think that we need to vote now on whether or not to accept the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Committee?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
I don't have a question about the amendment, though.
You do or you don't?
I do not.
Okay. So I think the amendment would state that we would tentatively approve this for the beginning of school, subject to the handbook, our feedback being given to the school council, and it would be, we would return, or the handbook would be returned to us and considered at the meeting following the school council's meeting. Okay? So we are voting on whether or not to amend the motion. So all those in favor of amending the motion? That is 5 in favor. All those opposed? 2 opposed. The motion passes. The motion is now amended. All those, are we ready to vote?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if we're going to go through this process, then my question is on page 20. The fundraising policy states that student government approves fundraising done by student organizations, and then it's finally approved by you. Is that correct?
Correct. The
So
final
is-
approval is the principal's.
So is there a process for deciding what is and is not appropriate? For instance, are groups able to have a wine raffle?
No. So we always give the student government the guidelines of within the school rules. So that's their kind of boundary. And then as it comes to me, certainly I would veto anything inappropriate.
And so when things that are inappropriate are done, what is the process?
It depends on who's doing this fundraiser, because sometimes the fundraisers come from outside groups. So sometimes we have to talk with outside groups, but if it's an inside group, then we go back to the group and have that discussion with them. And we have in the past where we have issues where we've had to pull them back.
And what is the training for people who are in charge of student groups so that they know this?
Generally, conversation with the advisors, so class advisors and student government advisors. We have conversations about even things like their own fundraising. So we like to sit down with them and bring them through the processes of, you know, your own fundraising or the student government approval process, how they're looking at it. And we have an advisor with each of those groups, so there's adults involved in there as well. So we do count on.
My question is how are advisors trained on these policies?
Through a conversation at the beginning of the school year. So each year, these positions are basically requested by staff members, so generally we have the same, but oftentimes somebody different will come into the group, and we'll have that conversation about, here's how you do X, here's how you do Y, here's how you do this. They meet with actually Lisa Heights as well to go through the process of, you know, moving, depositing money based on the policies.
Okay. Looks like we are ready to vote on the amended motion. Okay. Is everyone clear on the motion? Okay. All those in favor? That is 6 in favor. Those opposed? 1 opposed. The motion passes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Next up, we have a vote on the athletic fee structure for the 2021-2022 school year. And I believe that Mr. Genualdo is going to give us some information on that. Oh, God, ants.
Hello.
Ants crawling on me.
So usually by now we've established a user fee. I would have met with Vinny. We would have shared that fee with our families and would be in the process of collecting those fees. We still have something on the table that was discussed quite a bit and worthy of that discussion, but with sports starting tomorrow and then the rest starting Monday, you know, we're at the point where we got to make a decision on this. The question on the table is, so currently the district gives 25% toward an individual user fee and has a family cap whereby the third sport for a family, for an individual, so if you play 3 sports, you get your spring sport for free, or if you have 4 or more greater sports within your household, you get the 4th and greater free. That's what we do now. There was a discussion about, do we take that approximately 10% is how we calculate that family cap and apply it evenly to everybody, making an even 35%. Last year, we were part of a subcommittee meeting that seemed to be on the brink of moving forward with the 35% across all fees, with the well-intentioned thought that it's better to apply this to everybody rather than to the approximately 17% of the people that benefit from the family cap. I think that was in the beginning of April that we had that subcommittee meeting. Subsequent to that meeting, and I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was pushing it hard, but I certainly got it and had no problem if that was the way the committee went. It was a very good point to make that it affected everybody. Subsequent to that meeting last year, spring sports started the Monday after April break, which was April 20-something. What we found was that people that had registered not knowing that we had to adapt that fee last year, because last year we had 4 seasons and it would have been a financial disaster if we had kind of kept it exactly the same. So for example, last year, if you had a track athlete that did cross country, swimming, and spring track, they were assuming that and we did send out notifications, but last year we were getting 50,000 emails. They were under the assumption the track fee came out, that track was going to be free. Once they found out it wasn't free, they called me. There was probably about 5 or 6 families total, most in track, some in tennis, that said, we're not paying this. We thought we had this sport free, we're not paying it. And so what that did was, the way our fee is structured is that it's structured based on participation numbers. So what we originally thought was 17%, what happened was more people, everybody on the track team was affected by that, because those 5 or 6 people left, that made the fee more for everybody, because that family wasn't going to pay the fee. And so, we have enough issues with fees being high. We certainly know that in the spring, it's hard to keep kids engaged academically. Their mind tends to wander. And we're about keeping people active, whether it's through sports or band or school plays or whatever your passion is. Our deal is to keep people engaged and active and working within a community toward a common goal. I wouldn't have known this in the beginning of April, but after seeing what happened in the spring, both with our user fees skyrocketing and people not participating, and it is true that some people didn't play because of COVID, but these were people that signed up. These weren't people that didn't sign up. These were people that signed up and then called, and so now instead of track having 35 kids, maybe it had 29, and that 6 is a huge number. And our track fee last year for boys and girls was like $750. It was outrageous. So it would be with no disrespect meant to the work that was done last year, just based on new knowledge, my recommendation would be keep it as is this year and look hopefully to give more money overall to athletics next year for the benefit of user fees. Open to questions.
Thank you. So my question to you is, I assume, or my question to the committee is, we need to vote regardless whether we're keeping it the same or moving on. Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay. So I would entertain a motion before we enter into discussion.
I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District continue with the Family Cap program, maintaining status quo with a district contribution of 25% across all sports for the 2021-2022 school year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan. Discussion? Michelle?
So I guess I have a question about what you just said. If we actually had 4 seasons instead of 3, that seems like there was more opportunity to participate. So I'm not exactly sure how you're saying that the fee structure was changed. That would be my one question. And then the next question is if those people who had dropped had been getting it for free anyways, that cost would have been spread over the rest of the families. And if they were getting it for free.
No, but go ahead, like, I'll address your question.
If you could explain that. And then I would just add personally, yes, the 100% increase in the cost was a huge factor in making a decision around participating in track.
So I'll address your middle question first. If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's about if you have a bunch of kids essentially in the spring getting that sport free, how does that help the other kids, I think was essentially your question, right? Like, how does that make, the more kids that are registered, how does it make the fee go down if they're getting it for free?
Yes.
So the money that the district allocates toward a sport is constant, right? Like, there's X amount of a budget for a sport. The district pays 25% of that sport. The remainder gets divided by the number of kids registered. Okay. The family cap 10% is built in as if they paid. So the more kids that register, whether it's for free or not, the lesser cost it is for the paying families. So did that address your middle question?
I understand how that works.
The first point was around last year's seasonal structure. Even though there were more seasons, it was the same number of sports. So for example, the extra season was volleyball and football. Now, we did have a significant number of kids who had never played football before that played, say, soccer or cross country, take advantage of football and wound up playing 4. But we had more athletes that were traditional 3-season athletes that didn't choose to play volleyball or football for the first time and just skipped that wedge season. So yes, it was a chance for them to participate more, but not everyone wants to go for football, not everyone wants to go for volleyball. And so those families, but we had to do that, and our decision at the school committee level that I brought to you was that we would have lost a ton of money if people we would have lost a ton of money with the people that played by the number of people that played 4 sports. Because, for example, as an example, volleyball and football are both pretty costly, right? So people that did, say there was 10 extra kids that chose to play football and 6 extra kids that chose to play volleyball. That's about 10 grand that we would have been out had we kept the family, over the family cap number that we had. So we had to make that adjustment. I don't know if I answered that well enough, but.
Okay.
Other questions or discussion? Michelle Horgan?
Just what alarms me is that you said this last spring that the athletics that we offer to our students is the start of the second school day. Is that?
Yes, that was in my budget presentation I made that case.
Right, and that's huge. That's a huge statement to make, and that you have 6 or 7 families that chose not to do it because of the cost, that it wasn't free, is very impactful for me, especially too since I was on the subcommittee that initially brought forth this topic, and then at the end I was like, keep it. But this just reinforces my thought that we need to keep it, in my opinion, we need to keep it for those kids in that spring season. Or it could even be, it could be a family of 2 or 3 children that get this winter season free too.
And that's the people that we definitively know about that called me to tell me, that didn't just drop out without saying anything. That's a definitive number, that 5 or 6. And you're right, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we do believe that athletics is a second school day where every single goal that Mr. Tracy or Mr. Menegoni or any of you want for your students is taking place in a second school day every day. And it winds up being over 70% of your high school students participate in at least one sport. About 48% participate in 2 sports. And it's another whole activity where collaboration, teamwork, goal-oriented things, resiliency, all that stuff is what we do every day. And so we do feel like it's that valuable, and I know there's struggles within the district, but I just think for this, we've always planted a flag about participation. We've always done it. And the 10% you would save, so for example, if you did do 35%, say a soccer fee was $450. Now it's $395. It's not insignificant. I'm not saying $50 isn't significant, but for the overall value it does on the other end, I think the family cap is a better value for the money.
Okay. Julia?
Yeah, I was in that subcommittee meeting, and what I think is interesting is that we were actually concerned that it would lessen participation, but we didn't have hard data, so it was really hard to make a decision, and that's why we wanted to bring it to the full committee. So I always appreciate hard data and actual evidence to show the repercussions of some of the decisions. So thank you.
Okay, Anna?
Thank you. I also was on the subcommittee, and the data is interesting to see it. I will say, however, I don't know that for me personally it's moved my general feeling, which is what we're talking about doing benefits a very small number of students. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but to your own admission, 5 students here, 6 students there. I have a really difficult time at a high policy level doing anything for the sole betterment of less than 30 students, right? This is a district of 1,800-ish, well, maybe lower than that. Like, I personally still am gravitating towards the idea that if we increase the overall percentage, that's going to help the kids. And you said one sport is like 70%, 2 sports might be 40%. Like, now we're talking about affecting a very large number of students. So I don't like the idea that we're doing something that really is a very narrow slice of the student base. That feels oddly targeted in a way that just makes me uncomfortable. However, I'm horrified by what it costs to do sports in this district. And I'm horrified by the discrepancy between tennis versus track, which for the life of me, I can't understand why track would have ever been almost $800. But so I feel like it's almost like we're all in agreement, I think, that we have a problem, but the question is, how are we going to solve the problem? And I think the family cap is one way to get at it. I'm not convinced that getting rid of it is still not the right thing to do, but I'm really bothered by the overall imbalance. And I know we're not going to change anything for this next year or this next season, I know that, but this is a real problem, and I want us to really think through how can we make the sporting experience more equitable across every sport. And I keep coming back to the idea of normalizing the fees, combining the boosters. Instead of it be the soccer boosters and the baseball boosters and the football boosters, you just have the boosters for all the sports, like you do with the Friends of the Arts, right? Something that combines everybody, that helps everyone, so that you don't see these radical cleavages between the sports. So I know that's not the question before us tonight.
Yeah, I think we have a lot, so I think we need to focus in on the question at hand.
But it affects my view of this vote, because I'm troubled, and I get where you're coming from. And as someone who, again, loves sports, like, I want to see as many kids playing sports as possible, but I have a hard time catering a policy decision to.
So just to speak, I'm going to speak very narrowly to your specific point about this. We're talking about the 5 or 6 families that didn't play, but the other 30 that remained all had to pay a much higher fee because those people didn't play, or those people didn't participate. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's affecting more than just the 5 or 6 that aren't playing. It's terrible and tragic that they're not playing, and we don't want to have that. But it is affecting everybody else that decides to play, because now they have a greater burden to take on themselves. So, and that was, admittedly, I didn't say this in early April, right? It was only after. So I there's no, everything was well intentioned. I just, that's kind of the other piece.
Thank you. I'm going to have Jen, and then I think everybody's spoken who has wanted to speak after Jen. Did you want to speak? Jen.
I have a really short question. Last year, we ran into this problem because we had 4 seasons.
Yes.
Are we going to have 4 seasons in the fall again?
No. There's, we're back to a traditional 3-season scenario.
Okay. Has everyone spoken that wanted to speak? Okay. So are we ready to vote? Yes. Anyone have any questions on, everyone's clear on what we're voting on? A yes vote would be that the family cap would remain in place as it is this year. Okay, all in favor? That is 6 in favor, all opposed, 1 no, and the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, yes, thank you. Oh, I guess we'll see, we'll see. Sit down and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Next up, we have the consent agenda. It is, before I ask for a motion, I'd ask anyone to look at the consent agenda and suggest any items that you would like to pull from the consent agenda.
I'd like to pull item D.
I heard item D, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, D, you said. D.
D as in David.
D as in David, okay.
Or Delta.
Okay, anyone else pulling any items from the consent agenda? Okay, Jen, I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we accept the consent agenda, items A, the warrants, B, the donations, and C, the minutes as presented.
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan. The consent agenda has no discussion, so all in favor? It is unanimous of the 6 people present in the room, and the motion passes. And now I will entertain, I think it was Michelle that pulled D. Could we, actually, before we do that, I'd like to have a motion to, do you want to talk about them separately?
No, I can do the motion. I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the soccer booster ad booklet and the football booster ad booklet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, I think Michelle Horgan got the second on that one.
And then I held it because Mr. Moynihan waited.
I'm sorry, I actually can't hear you. Say that again.
I held it because we had somebody wait to just give us a little bit of information, and I'd like to give him the opportunity.
So you're talking specifically about the field hockey waiver, correct? Okay, so we need to have a vote on
No, I think it's about, soccer boosters.
No.
Football.
Football.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anything. Any game you want. Which game do you want? Football. Yep.
Just have samples if you want to look at them. Otherwise, I don't think I need to speak.
Okay.
Perfect.
That is, so I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding what was happening. So thank you, Michelle, for that clarification. Okay. So the motion on the table is to approve the soccer boosters ad booklet and the football boosters ad booklet. And we have, if there is anyone who has discussion, I'm willing to entertain discussion right now. Okay. Are we ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor? And it is unanimous, and the motion passes. Okay, thank you. All right.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve a waiver that will allow 8th grade students to play on the high school field hockey team.
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan. Is there discussion?
I actually had a question.
We've got Craig here, so it's a, yeah.
Why are we only doing this for field hockey? My daughter saw this, and she's a gymnast, and she would love to compete with the high school team, but it's not universally offered.
So, programs with dangerously low participation numbers is the first thing we look at. With gymnastics, we've partnered with Manchester Essex for probably 15 years, and there were some years where without them we wouldn't have had a team, and you're not able to have both an 8th grade waiver and a co-op with another school.
Okay. Is there other discussion or other questions? Okay. All those in favor of approving the 8th grade field hockey waiver? That is Unanimous? Okay, and the motion passes. All right, thank you. All right, we made up some good ground there, people. Nice. Okay. I think Vinny is up next with the FY21 year-end closeout and transfers presentation.
Mary Beth, am I missing a second page here?
You are indeed.
You don't have a back piece to that?
I have the back, but there should be a third page.
There should be,
Hold on.
And I don't have it.
I'll tell you what, I'm
Have it.
gonna pass
Hold
down
on.
mine because
There you go.
Yep.
And Benny should give you slides for this, because it's gonna be very specific. Benny should give you slides.
Yeah, do you want me to log out?
You want to make a motion?
I can project
Why don't you
from
make a
here if
motion?
you want to, if that's easier.
This is just Janelle's comment that I keep track of the votes on.
I can't hear you.
Not what I see on mine.
We can ask. I know that Vinny just got up there, but I'd like to ask the committee whether we would like a 5-minute break. Do people need that? How about, do we need 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take a quick, as the chair, I'm going to give us a 5-minute break, okay? Thank you.
decrease the fees, potentially.
No, because it depends on the number of kids who have registered.
Right.
Because
It's like
if you have to,
90
we had that
cooler
happen
outside.
with.
Oh, did you go outside?
Yes.
Is it cooler last year? So that
Well,
we
it
ended up
rained
creating
here in
another
Ford.
team, which caused the fee to
Okay.
go up.
Oh,
that was
Because
so
you had too many
crazy.
kids for the two teams.
My husband was sailing.
But not enough for three. Or,
Did you hide in your basement today?
No, I completely ignored it.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
it's a numbers game.
Yeah,
My husband
absolutely.
was sailing.
Oh,
He was like, what?
okay, we are getting ready to come back.
Completely insane. Was that a Jubilee? They do the races Thursday.
That's where we were watching at work. Yeah.
Okay, and we are back in session. And Vinny, I'm gonna throw it to you.
Thank you guys for letting me present to you tonight. I'm here to discuss the FY21 year-end actuals.
Vinny, I'm gonna ask you to speak up a little bit.
Should I?
Or maybe,
Can you hear this? Or should I almost?
I think it's actually a benefit that the chair appears to be the person who has the hardest time hearing in the room. I think that is actually a benefit. We can ask HW Cam if they can turn it up a little bit. Can you turn up the podium a little bit? Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so I'm here to discuss the FY21 actuals with you as of June 30th, 2021. So I originally made this slide to discuss some budget realities that we faced this year. I originally thought there was 4 of them, and then when I was sitting over there reviewing them, every single one of them are COVID related. So there's really only one budget reality that COVID completely flipped upside down the budget this year. Mainly, as maybe some of you remember, this time last year we presented to you a slide with, I believe it was somewhere around $900,000 of unanticipated COVID expenses. Well, that slide we originally made, not a lot of it came to fruition. Some of the stuff didn't happen, or some of it came in a lot lower than we anticipated. In addition to that, as you all know, we saw an extreme reduction of enrollment this year, and on top of that, even with the reduced enrollment, students were either hybrid, they weren't in present for part of the school year, or they were, fully in person, and even when they were fully in person, only half of them were really there most of the time. And then in addition to that, unanticipated stimulus funds were received, about $521,000. Well, we expensed $521,000 in stimulus funds over the course of the year. So this is the summary by DAC, or Distributed Accountability Center, by school location or by district office. So in summary, we ended the year with approximately $2.2 million favorable balance. I just need to note per our auditors that under this slide, under the central office DAC, there is an additional $60,261 over our budgeted amount of $97,000 for a total of $157,261 transfer to cover the deficit in the food service revolving account. And I had to specifically say each dollar amount. And then this is that same chart, but in DESI category. Again, this is what you guys originally approve and vote on. So you can see, again, the $2.2 million distributed amongst the, I believe it's 11 different DESI categories, and the food service deficit under the DESI category falls under pupil services. So I'm going to go through each DESI category. For each one of them, I kind of developed a little pie chart and a summary of the original budget, our year-to-date expenses, plus our encumbrances, and the balance. I'm going to not dive too much on each of the charts, but I really just developed them because I realize everyone learns in different ways, everyone sees things differently, so maybe someone takes something away more from this than just the words and numbers on different slides. So for the first DAC is administration. We're seeing a $225,000 favorable balance to budget, or roughly 19% of the budget left over. So, and you can interrupt me whenever you want if you have a question. So for the detail around this, there's a couple different categories. Again, I just kind of summarized what the big buckets of each item were. There are somewhere around 700 different individual line items. I obviously don't list out every single one of them, but just to name a few, the superintendent's discretionary spending and the business office's discretionary spending combined amounted to about $130,000. In both instances, I believe in the first quarter, we did transfer funds to cover anticipated expenses, but those expenses actually came in much lower than we had anticipated, so there was the result of savings there. In addition, there was deferred hiring from the business office staff. As we discussed throughout the year, there was 2 positions cut, 1 added back in, but we did go the whole year without actually hiring that staff member. So I just want to thank Jen and Larry for all their work over the year. In addition, the HR contracted services savings, at that same meeting in, it must have been September for Q2 transfers, we asked for an additional sum of, I believe, around $40,000 to help with HR contracted services. But again, I have to thank Jen, because combined between me and Jen, we kind of took on a lot of the work and did not have to contract it out. That resulted in savings of about $21,000. To offset that in this DESI category, we did go over on our school committee secretary line. As you know, there was a lot more meetings this year. They were remote. It required more time from our secretary to develop the minutes, to watch the meetings. Therefore, we did go over on that line. In addition, some of you might remember that during our 22 budget process, we did see an increase in our district administrative technology line item. This wasn't additional expenses. This was just the reclassification of expenses. Well, you saw that in the budget, so you're also going to see it in our year-end actuals for 21. In addition to that, the special ed legal services did go over budget by about $13,000. Moving on, the capital maintenance and operations, we're seeing a favorable balance of about $90,000, or roughly 4%. This is mainly due to just some contracted services and repairs money left over at the end of the year, a little bit of supplies money, because some of the stimulus grants picked up a lot of the cleaning supplies. In addition, across the district, we saw about an $11,000 favorable balance for our gas, electricity, telephone, and water lines. And then in addition to that, some of the overtime, because COVID closed a lot of events, didn't end up happening, so we had a little bit of a balance left over there, netting out to approximately $10,000. That line item also includes portions of the year where there wasn't actually 2 custodians in one of the buildings. For whatever reason, either one resigned and the new one didn't come in till a few weeks later, so we didn't spend the full amount on their salary. The next item is fixed assets. This is probably one of the smallest categories. We're seeing about a $1,500 favorable balance, or roughly 2%. And this is the result of literally one item, the desks and chairs we ordered when they were delivered. We had a little incident with the delivery driver, and Tom was able to negotiate a little bit of a credit from the company for the problems they caused us that day.
And it was a problem. Was that at Winthrop?
Good job, Tom.
No, the delivery driver refused to mask up. It was a credit.
The next one is guidance, counseling, and testing. We're seeing a favorable balance of about $46,000, or roughly 4%. This is mainly due to staff turnover, a retirement within the office, and one type of medical leave that occurred. This is offset by just a minor overage in their testing supplies and contracted services line. The next big item is instructional materials, where we're seeing about $245,000 favorable balance, or roughly 25%. This directly coincides with the second slide, where I showed you that majority of the time students weren't in the building, so they weren't consuming all the supplies and materials that they would regularly have ordered. Our instructional materials line items in the budget probably have somewhere around 100 different line items. So I didn't really know how to break out the whole story behind it, so I decided to just break it out by school, because at the end of the day, almost 25% of the materials went unspent, so you really couldn't narrow it down to one area. It was everything across the board. The next group is instructional leadership, where we saw about a $226,000 favorable balance, or roughly 9%. The detail around this, it has a lot to do with the IT department. During the reductions in COVID, the IT department lost one IT technician. In addition to that, they started the year with a resignation from one of them. They were able to manage the entire year without rehiring the IT technician that resigned. So even with everything that was going on, they really stepped it up and were able to distribute out all the technology this year without too big of hiccups, and helped us save about $50,000 from that one position. The next item is just our district-wide unfilled clubs and activity stipends. So in the budget, there's two different groups of stipends. This one falls under instructional leadership, and as a result of COVID, a lot of the clubs just didn't run because there wasn't any after-school activities, so we did not pay out the stipends, resulting district-wide in about another $50,000 favorable balance. I broke out just this one stipend because I thought it was important that this one stipend alone saved us, not to say saved us, but left us with about $25,000 balance. That is the new teacher mentor stipends. So every year when a new teacher comes on board, we take a veteran teacher and have them mentor the new teacher, and we pay the veteran teacher a stipend for it. For FY21, that did not occur because we didn't want people meeting with each other. So that resulted in about a $25,000 favorable balance from that one stipend alone. In addition, we had a retirement in the curriculum office in March. As some of you may remember, we did repurpose that salary for the community family engagement liaison, if I have the title correct. She's right there, she might correct me if I don't, but either way, so you'll see in another DESI category that there is a negative balance left over. This is the part that falls into instructional leadership. And the last item is just administrative turnover. So for what we originally budgeted for FY21, we had, I believe, 2 administrators resign, and the ones we brought on were at a little bit lower of a salary, resulting in about $16,000. The next, and I believe biggest group, is insurance, retirement, and other, coming in at approximately $494,000 favorable balance, or roughly 9%. And the first line item alone, as I discussed at the last forecast, was unemployment. Just to briefly hit it again, when we had our kind of COVID-19 reductions of 2021, we cut approximately 20 or 21 FTEs from the budget. For every one of those positions we cut, I budgeted the full year of unemployment for every one of those employees, and come to find out, not a lot of them either applied for unemployment or were able to receive a job from another district or another company. This resulted in an unemployment favorable balance alone of approximately $291,000. Our insurance lines, now this is all our insurances, our health insurance, life insurance, property insurance, liability, workers' comp, our student accident insurance, all had a favorable balance of about $228,000. Most of that was in health insurance, and that was mainly due to a drop in enrollment. You'll see on a slide coming up that there was a few additional positions not filled, the payroll position in the business office, the IT technician position, and 2 more you'll see in a second. We budgeted health insurance for all 4 of those positions. We never filled them, so we obviously never paid for health insurance for them. The next group is Medicare and Social Security taxes. This changes every year depending on who we hire. Certain employees don't have to pay into these programs, and we don't know who they are until they actually come. So at the end of the year, we had about $29,000 left over. These favorable budget balances were offset by the cost of the tents last year. Some of the tents were covered by COVID grants, but the ones that weren't fell to our general fund budget, causing about a $61,000 deficit for the tents only. Next one is other teaching services, where we saw about a $201,000 favorable balance, or roughly 8%. This is due to the teaching assistant vacancy turnover, and the best way I can explain this is during FY21, the teaching assistants were almost a revolving door. Every day of the year, there was an open vacancy for TAs, whether it was they resigned because of COVID, or they resigned because they got a teaching position in another district, or we just couldn't find one because nobody was applying. At every day of the year, there was an open TA vacancy. So district-wide, throughout all 5 schools and the special ed department, we saw about $168,000 balance alone on the teaching assistant salary lines. The BCBA and SLP positions that we added to the FY21 budget were never filled. These were part of the 2 positions I mentioned a minute ago for the health insurance. Their salaries alone combined resulted in about $150,000 savings, but directly offset by that was, since we didn't have the employees in-house, we had to contract out the services. So this resulted in about $112,000 overage on that line item. The next thing is home tutoring services. So throughout a normal year, we supply additional tutoring services to students, sometimes in their home. Well, we weren't going into students' homes this year because of COVID, so this almost had 0 expenses throughout the whole year. In addition to that, some of the students that were going to receive services, I was told, got outplaced out of district, so their kind of costs were covered under the tuitions line item, which left the balance here of about $72,000. In addition to that, our summer school program last year, not this year, there was always a big question around whether it was going to run, because that was kind of right when COVID, not to say ended because it's still going, but right when the school year ended, we were questioning what kind of summer school program we were going to have. We did ultimately run a summer school, but it was at a drastically reduced price tag. Therefore, we saw about a $22,000 favorable balance there. The next one is our unspent online coursework, otherwise known as our virtual school. Again, bringing you back to about this time last year with the unforeseen COVID expenses, we thought we were going to have a drastic uptick in students that applied to our virtual school. We did see an uptick, but not as much as we anticipated. So we had about $13,000 left over there. To offset some of these is our substitute coverage. Again, this kind of relates to all the FFCRA leaves and the medical leaves that happened this year. We had to bring in substitutes to cover them. This was actually more than we anticipated at about $157,000. The next one is professional development. Although it doesn't have the biggest budget balance, it does represent the biggest percentage at about 51% of the expenses left over. And one could obviously assume, because of COVID, people were not going out receiving professional development from outside vendors, and we did not have vendors come in and provide professional development in-house. This again, there's probably 50 different line items for professional development, so I was struggling on how to present it, so again, I just did it based on each school's location. Next is pupil services at $801,000. I guess this is the highest, sorry, or at roughly 26%. During our Q3 forecast, I did warn you that our special ed transportation expenses were coming in much lower than we anticipated. This, again, is because of COVID. Students that we originally would have transported to an out-of-district school either did it virtually, did it remote, so they did not need the transportation, or their parents chose to transport them, which we pay a drastically lower rate of reimbursement to them for. The next thing is PPE. At the beginning of last school year, we anticipated, I believe, around $400,000 in PPE. This is what most of our stimulus money went to, was PPE across the district. That's why you see such a big residual balance left over at the year. We did purchase probably close to $350,000 worth of PPE, but again, it all ended up going to the school reopening COVID grant. The next one is athletics at about $107,000 favorable balance. This was because some of the sports did not run during next year, so the district did not have to contribute to the 25% match. In addition, you heard Mr. Genualdo say that a lot of the fourth sport that we tried to implement didn't actually come true and left a favorable balance from the family cap as well. Down to the next one, general ed transportation. Again, because of COVID, for every time I say it, I should count, but either way, general ed transportation, we have about a $40,000 favorable balance. This is majority because of the after-school transfer bus did not run because we weren't doing after-school activities. The next one is lunch monitors. My opinion on this one is most of our lunch monitors are retired teachers of an older age bracket. We found that they did not want to come in because of COVID. They did not want to expose themselves, especially in the lunchroom. So all year we were struggling with finding lunch monitors. Therefore, you see a residual balance of about $36,000. Again, the extracurricular stipends, that's again just the activities not running after school. We did not do a certain of our graduation kind of week events, candlelight. We couldn't do a tent this year at graduation. This resulted in about a $28,000 favorable balance. The DECA National Conference and the National History Fair, I think that's supposed to be HF, did not run last year, leaving about a $12,000 favorable balance. These are offset by two items: our unbudgeted nursing stipends. Again, because of COVID, we had to have the nurses come in a little bit more than they originally would have. And the cafeteria bailout. This is the amount, obviously, above the budget amount that I mentioned before. Teachers, we're seeing about $161,000, or roughly 1%. If you ask me, that's pretty much right on budget. There's really only a couple items that make this up. During the switch from in-person to fully remote program, there was one teacher left over at the Winthrop School, so we saw about an $86,000 favorable balance there. The staff turnover at the high school, up at the high school, it was probably one of the only schools last year that did implement our hiring strategy, where a higher teacher goes out on the top of the pay scale and we bring in a lower one. Last year, we didn't see that happen everywhere across the 5 schools, but we did at the high school to the tune of about $102,000. So thanks, Eric. Our FMLA and FFCRA unpaid leaves throughout the year resulted in about an additional $72,000 favorable balance, because we were not paying the full salary of the teachers, and we were bringing in a substitute at a much lower rate. And then this is offset by the need for the additional 1.0 FTE at the middle school that we had requested from you, I believe, in September. The last one is our tuitions. This is the only DESI category that is over expended at a roughly $416,000 in the negative, or roughly 13% over budget. And this is obviously because of one reason, and that's because we prepaid tuitions last year, which resulted prepaid last year for 22, which resulted in the deficit of about $400,000. So again, combined, we're seeing about a $2.2 million favorable balance, or roughly 6%. So at this point, there is only one budget transfer we would need to do, and that is to bail out the tuitions account. I would recommend that we take it from pupil services, as that was the biggest budget balance left over at roughly $800,000. So that would be the transfer I am proposing, and the next one is the motion. I can stop and keep going and come back to it, or You can discuss it and ask me what you need to, or I can keep going. Keep going.
It doesn't matter either way. We could do the motion, right? Yeah.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approves the fiscal year 21 operating and expense budget transfers as recommended here by the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration and as presented on the previous slide entitled, quote, proposed year-end transfers, end quote.
Second.
Second by Anna. Are there questions or discussion regarding this? Michelle Bailey?
So is the 419, whatever, is that the amount that we prepaid for next
no,
year? Or
no, we did have a balance left over in the tuitions account. I think roughly about 400. We're roughly north of 800, so the two net together for the deficit of 400.
Okay.
Julia?
Yes. So I just have two questions. One is, and it's really, I'm not trying to dispute the budget, but are the TA vacancies, is that a concern for the district? Is that something we need to be looking at?
I think it was
You
a
said there
concern
every
all-
day there was, you know,
I think if you
turnover?
remember from last year, we were putting out calls to have people apply. We had them posted all year, but we and every other district really struggled to fill those positions. So that was something that there were positions left unfilled all year just because of the candidate pool was very, very shallow.
Okay, so this is something all districts were struggling with last year. And my second question is the $107,000 for athletics. Is this something that could potentially be used to alleviate fees or no?
Not for next year, because all this has to fall to E&D at the end of this year, so you can't utilize it.
Right, but if we end up having this kind of surplus in the future, is this something we can look at, or I don't know?
If we continue to have a balance every year, we should definitely revisit how we are calculating our user fees. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anna?
First, as someone who appreciates data in detail, I just want to give you public credit for the level of data in detail that you just went through. So that has to be noted.
Thank you.
I think my question is a little bit of a question and maybe a little bit more future thinking as we go into another year of relative budget uncertainty. You know, we like to think we're on stable ground, but we're not. But I'm looking at this overall overage, and I'm just thinking optically, you know, that $2.2 million stings a little in light of how the year was, and I'm thinking especially about those 6th grade foreign languages, which I know we've restored, which is good. But I think as we move forward, I guess on some level as we enter into uncertainty, if we are foreseeing this kind of windfall at some point in the year, and maybe this is really more for Vinny and pending interim superintendent Eric Tracy, but if we think about, you know, places where we might have a deficiency and we see this, I would have loved some sort of course correction earlier in the year. Maybe at the semester break we could have restored. I know hindsight's 2020, so I'm not really criticizing last year, but if we look forward, I have a hard time swallowing that overage because it just makes me say, my gosh, there's so much we could do with $2.2 million. And I think the public might look, you know, I just think we should be aware of it. My next question, a true question, Dana. So because of the E&D, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, because I know we talked about it at a capital subcommittee, what to do with this unanticipated Chapter 70. We knew there was going to be a little bit of a balance, but I think at the time we last talked about it, it wasn't quite this high. It was...
This has nothing to do with Chapter 70. That's in addition to the 2.2.
It is.
Yes.
So the
which is on the next slide.
So I just want to make sure then I understand then the total overall, our policy says that we can retain 3% of the operating budget, right? The original budgeted operating budget, not the actuals, not the year end, but the original.
The budget, correct.
The original budget, right? Which by my math is about $950,000. Does that sound about right to you?
No, it's
I
gotta be
believe it's
north
a
of
little
$1 million.
more. It's about 1.1.
Yeah.
But
okay. But in
Call it $1 million.
But in concept, and this is mostly for the public who I know are really listening. So we'll pull that 3% off, put that into the E&D. But if what you're saying is correct, does that mean then that we have, if we're going to add Chapter 70 in as well, almost $2 million that's going to go back to the towns as a credit on their assessment for fiscal year 23?
I would like to defer that question until we have a capital finance meeting to discuss what we're going to do with it. I do have ideas, but
Okay.
I'd
But
like
my
to vet
basic,
them
my
through
basic,
through
my
there
basic
first.
question isn't flawed. Like, there's a significant amount of
Yes.
money.
Yep. If we do nothing, then yes, that all would fall back to the town.
Okay.
Correct. The combination of that 2.2 and what I'm going to show you in a second.
Okay. That was my segue to your next bit. You're welcome.
Is there other discussion or questions about the motion? Okay. Looks like we're ready to vote. All in favor of the motion on the table on the board? It is unanimous, and the motion passes.
Okay, so that was the expense side of the budget, but every budget must balance, and the other side is our revenues. Normally, this time of year, I would like our treasurer to be here to kind of give you a more detailed report on our receipts, but I wanted to at least give you something so you guys have an idea of what's going on here. When that time comes, our treasurer will give you a more detailed look at everything. But this is the revenues only as it relates to our general fund receipts. So as you can see on the top line, is the Chapter 70 overage, as you can call it, of approximately $773,000. That, combined with every other item on here, all get grouped together to account for approximately $1.1 million. This is the additional amount over our revenues that we received. So we received $1 million over our revenues, and we spent $2 million under on our expenses. So you have to add those two together. Just for argument's sake, it's roughly $3 million. That is the amount that will, in theory, get close to E&D or that will be utilized. So I wanted to give you a picture of the total amount, but more specifically, I want to talk to you about the state transportation number here, because along with the expense budget transfer you just did, annually we have to do a regional transportation transfer. After going through this last year, I realized that I really didn't explain it good enough to you guys. At least I didn't feel like I did at the end, so this is my attempt to try to explain it better. So to do that, I kind of have to start with how is the regional transportation calculated in the first place. FY21, as you can imagine, with COVID is just a disaster for everything. It's for us, for the state. So I'm not using 21 as an example. I'm going to use the year before it, which is FY20. So to calculate our FY20 regional transportation reimbursement, you have to first look at the prior year expenses. So this would be our FY19 actual education transportation expenses. This came in at roughly $770,000. This is what I'm calling our variable number one, because while building our FY20 budget in February or March, we have no idea where we're gonna end the year for our transportation expenses. So at that time, it's our variable number one. The next thing they take into consideration is how much of your students that you're transporting live above 1.5 miles from their school, because the state comes in and says, we're not going to reimburse you for anyone under 1.5 miles. So you have to come up with a list of all your riders, you have to calculate where they live and what their distance to their school is, then come up with the percentage. For FY19, our percentage was 71.6616, and yes, they do go to the 100,000ths of a decimal place. So that is what I call variable number two, because that changes every year depending on who we're transporting and where they live. So you take those two numbers, you multiply them together, it comes out with 551,000. This is what the state calls the base reimbursable amount. But the state comes in and says, you know what, we're not covering 100% of your transportation costs. We're gonna reimburse you for X. That X number depends on what the state as a whole is doing. So at the end of 19, the state came in and said, based on the entire state, we can give you approximately 83.956%. This is variable number 3. Those 3 amounts together come out to $462,000. This is what we actually receive for our FY20 reimbursements. There was a minor fluke at the end of 20, because as you remember, that was still kind of COVID time, and the state realized they had more money. So if someone's taking these numbers and trying to trace them to what the state says, we did receive about an additional $15,000, but that was a total fluke that doesn't really happen every year. So you have 3 variables to come up with your total calculation. So the state realized this. They said, they realized what kind of regional school districts were struggling with, that we can't anticipate what this number is going to be, and every year we're kind of just guessing. So back in 2014, they amended Section 16C, Chapter 71, to include a line that allowed regional school districts to establish a revolving fund and dump money into the revolving fund for any amount, for not to exceed 1 year's worth of revenue. Once you hit that amount, no matter what, everything has to go back to E&D. So on May 7th, 2015, the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee voted to establish this regional transportation reimbursement fund. And over the past few years, we've transferred our excess revenues above the budget into this account. So what I'm proposing again is that we do that again. So what that would mean is that we would transfer $206,094 from our Transportation Chapter 71 revenue account to our Regional Transportation Reimbursement Fund. And as you can see, our FY21 actual amount received from the state was $538,000. Our budgeted amount was $332,000. You ask why are we so far off? Again, it's because of those 3 variables, but on top of that, last year our state senators and congressmen said to anticipate a 20% reduction. That included our regional transportation, so we dropped it drastically, and then it never ended up happening, just like Chapter 70 didn't happen. So if you do approve this tonight, combined with the past 2 transfers, it would leave approximately $373,000 in the revolving account. So why do we do this? I kind of explained a little bit of it, but so right now, if you do this, we have $373,000 in the account. Once that hits our approximate amount we receive every year, we can take that amount and place it in our budget for the next year and budget the exact amount that we're going to receive instead of this variable of 3 different numbers. So for example, this coming February and March, you're going to vote to approve our budget for FY23. Let's just say we hit that amount this year. At the same time, we've already closed out FY21's books. We already know what the regular ed transportation expenses are, which is variable number 1. We already did the list of who lives over 1.5 miles, so we know variable number 2. And the state's already passed their budget, and they've already distributed whatever money they're going to distribute, so we already know variable number 3. So what it means is when I go to build the 23 budget, there's no more guessing, there's no more maybe we're going to receive more than we anticipate. It's the exact amount we're going to get, and it makes the assessment to the towns just that much more accurate, because they're paying for what they're actually receiving this year, and there's no overage and no difference. So if you approve that, that is the motion, and I believe that does it for my slides, so I can answer more
Thank
questions.
you. Can we have a motion, please?
Is there specific wording, Vinny? I can't.
Just what's right.
It's
Got it.
second to last slide, yep.
I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee approves the fiscal year 21 regional transportation transfer as recommended here by the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration and as presented on a previous slide entitled, quote, proposed regional transportation transfer, end quote.
Second.
Second by Michelle Bailey. Are there questions? Any discussion? Okay. It's like we're ready to vote. Those in favor of the motion? And the vote is unanimous, and the motion passes. Thank you.
So that kind of does it for the presentation. I'll answer questions if you want, but just to end it, there's a lot of work to be done in the Capital Finance Committee, because although it's a good thing there's this balance, it could be detrimental in the future. So we need to meet.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether it's Finny or Mary Beth that's going to address the next item, which is our FY23 budget development calendar.
I'll have Vinny address that, to just go over the process. And just, there's just a couple of adjustments there.
Come on.
The primary one is, again, adding that additional school committee meeting. And Vinny, do you want to pull that up, or? do you
Yeah,
want
that's
me
what I
to do
was
it?
trying to.
And the other thing that I would just speak to is, again, this is a tentative timeline because we do not yet know when the town meeting is going to be. So you get a sense of what the process is going to look like, but you have to be aware that once that date is set, that may trigger changes in all the other dates.
So at this point, just for clarification, we are voting on this, but it is remaining as a draft? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is to, yes, vote that in, but you know that it's tentative, right? That it can change.
It's an important
And
document.
people have it, just in terms of getting this pulled up, everybody has access to it, so you can see
Yeah,
it.
does everyone have it?
Vinny, I wouldn't stress too much about it. If people have any questions related to the process, we can certainly address that. Otherwise, you've seen this before, and there just were some additions, particularly related to adding an additional school committee meeting.
So when I developed it, I don't think there is still a date for town meeting, is there?
That's correct, we don't know.
So it's kind of subject to change. This is all based on a town meeting for the first Saturday in April. Last year it was the first Saturday in May. I personally would prefer the first Saturday in May because it gives us more time to go over the budget, but nonetheless, I designed it for the sooner date that arrives first. And there are requirements within the budget that 45 days before town meeting, we have to approve our final budget. 30 days before that, we had to approve a tentative budget. So just counting 45 days back, it did result in an off-week budget approval. Now, I could have made it on the on week, but what that caused is everything to back up a meeting and us having the principals and department heads coming in before Christmas, the week of Christmas, to give everyone the presentation, which from what I heard last year, we did not want to do. So because of that, I kind of pushed it out to that off week. It does give us a little bit of flexibility if you don't approve the budget. There is one more week, but it's that day.
Okay. Could we have a motion?
I move that we approve the fiscal year 23 budget development calendar as presented.
Second.
Second by Michelle Bailey. Are there questions, discussion? Anna?
Just a couple minor things. When you ink it for real and get a tattoo of it, you've got some 2020 commingled with 2022 in there. Just small date scrivener's errors again.
Thank you.
But we know what you mean.
Yep.
Michelle Bailey?
I just want to say it's a really important document for us to share with towns and FinComs because it lets them know when we're expecting that we're all going to get together. So.
Yeah, I will say, Michelle, as my learning curve as the chair, I have actually already been asked for this information, and it's something don't know that it would have anticipated independently, so yes,
Made it
it's
more
an important
difficult
document.
is the turnover in Wenham with the town manager, and now kind of the turnover here. I didn't want to set a date with someone who wasn't going to be here, and vice versa. So the dates in blue, I'm going to have to coordinate with somebody.
But I do feel like
I don't know how to say it.
I felt like the feedback we got from the boards last year, those meetings, were really well received. That seems to be a persistent message. So I think that's, I think Michelle is right on. It's important for them to see we're wanting to talk to them.
Okay.
And, sorry, my
Oh,
question.
Jen?
The capital and finance subcommittee meetings, those dates are flexible, right? Because as far as I know, we haven't.
Yeah, totally. That's why they're in blue, because we all need to coordinate our schedules.
But this
I
is
just
a-
kind of threw in
Right,
tentative,
but
we
this
should
is
do
a-
it that week.
Right, it's a very helpful guide, though, to know, like, if you've got it listed here on November 9th, that it ought to be around November 9th.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure they weren't set in stone.
Yep.
Nope.
okay. Are we ready to vote? All right. All in favor? And the vote is unanimous, and the motion passes. Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you, Vinny.
Next, we have we need to have a vote to appoint a committee member to sign the warrants. Currently Anna is doing that, and annually we need to nominate someone to sign the warrants. And so I am wondering if we have a nomination for a person to sign the warrants. Anna?
I'd like to nominate Julia Campbell, if she is able to do it. I did it this year as a first-year member, and it was so helpful to see the bills and have a little bit of touch point with Vinny. And since I think that you're on the capital subcommittee, I don't think it would be bad. The only reason I wouldn't also nominate Jen is as secretary. You're already doing a lot of work, and it seems that we should spread that burden. So, and I think it'd be great at it. It'd be super fun. I nominate Julia.
Would you accept that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations?
Julie, I just want to make sure you understand, like, it has to be at a specific time on a specific day.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Normally Wednesdays, 3-ish.
And they like it if you bring them chocolate and cookies. Just FYI.
And
And if I can't do it, then what happens?
currently, I am the backup.
Okay.
And I am frequently at the central office. So it is, so what
Live
we.
like 2 seconds.
Exactly. What we have been currently doing is that if Anna is, on the rare occasion that Anna has been unable to do it, she has contacted me and we have worked it out together.
Okay.
All right, so we have a nomination and it was accepted. I'm not sure that we got a second. Did we get a second on the nomination?
Second.
Thank you. No, seconded by Jen. All right, looks like we're ready to vote. All in favor of Julia being the warrant signer? The motion is unanimous. It passes unanimously.
Thank you,
Just
Julia.
a
Thank you.
point of order. Last year, didn't we vote that everyone could sign? Just in
Thank
case?
you. Yes, so you think we annually, to Julia's question, so we can, I would entertain a motion that in case where Julia is unable to sign, any member can be tapped to sign.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by David. All those in favor? And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. All right, I very much do want to get to our executive session. I'm going to ask that let's see what we have next. Do we have anything from policy?
Not right now, but we need to meet, and I would like definitive clarification on who is on policy. I know it's myself and Michelle Horgan, and I think it's maybe Jen, but I'd like to know who the third is.
I don't remember the committees that we decided.
It was a day when David wasn't there, and we said we would ask David. So 2 people were appointed, and David is being asked.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't appointed, but I was looking what the fall's looking really busy, but I'll definitely be part of it. We'll figure it out.
So you're saying
Yes.
yes? Do we feel like we need a vote on the policy committee?
I think
Right.
if we voted everyone else, we
think-
probably should.
Yeah.
Okay, should we just vote to appoint David to the policy committee? I would entertain such a motion.
I move that the policy working group be made of Anna Cizik, Michelle Horrigan, and David Polito. Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Anna. All in favor? Is unanimous and the motion passes. Okay.
I'll get a meeting organized that works for everybody.
Great. Thank you. Mary Beth, in the interest of time, I'd like if you would give us a brief district goal update. My goal is really to try to get us to executive session quite soon.
I'm going to hit super high level highlights. Under the building district vision and strategic plan, we have established the Portrait of a Graduate design sessions. They will be October 6th, October 27th, November 17th, and December 9th. We have done a tremendous amount of work laying the foundation for our teaching and learning goals, and we will talk a lot more about that on the September 9th meeting, where we will have a presentation related to summer learning, and we'll be talking both about student learning and about our educator learning. In terms of the DEI goal, we have the RFP out to bid, and we anticipate choosing a provider by mid-September. Our professional development committee has looked at establishing times for this work, and currently the launch is scheduled for the October in-service day. And the last goal related to improving learning environments, Tom, I'll let you make just a couple comments around that.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So where I'm at so far is I have issued a request for proposal for the design services for the athletic facilities project. Received 2 responses for that, so it's just a matter of working through the procurement when I return next week. And for the RFP for consulting services for the 2014 master plan, the more I got into the work, rather than hire an architecture firm, I would really like to take on kind of the project management role of that and hire sub-consultants, I guess you'd say. So I know it seems like I'm hiring more consultants, but at the same time, I'm more acquainted with the buildings than hiring somebody else to be the project manager. So it allows me to leverage some of our existing contractors that we're already using. There's no sense in paying a fire alarm and a fire sprinkler engineer to come in and make an assessment when we're testing those annually. So I'll leverage some of those reports while updating the plan. If we look back at the 2014 and the 2011 studies, there hasn't been drastic changes to our facilities. So I wanted to take that on. So kind of looking for consensus from folks to be okay to deviate from the specific language in that goal, because the end result will be the same at the end.
Okay. So I'm not sure. Go ahead, Michelle. You look like you formulated a question.
The goal is to continue the foundation to build. So where did the needing an I didn't see that as stating we need an architectural person to do that?
No, so that's what's been done in prior years and in prior studies.
Yes, it has, and it has gone nowhere. Yeah.
Right. So, rather than shell out the expense for an architecture firm to assemble all of the documents that I'm going to be handing them anyways, I would like the opportunity to be able to do that.
I guess, and maybe this is what Michelle was saying, the deliverables are certainly outlined, and it sounds like you're still anticipating producing the deliverables.
100%.
Right, so I'm not sure, but I'm not sure that it's really up to us to get in the weeds with how you get that done. But I will, if other people feel differently. Yeah.
I don't disagree, but I would just like to applaud that anytime we can leverage in-house knowledge, if it exists, I think when we need outside consultants, like we do with the DEI goal, I think that makes a lot of sense. But as Michelle said, you know these buildings better than anyone. You know where the where the weaknesses are. So I guess if you're looking for affirmation, you have it for me. I think that sounds like a good plan as long as the end result is still delivered.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to committee reports. I don't anticipate we have a lot. Capital Finance? Nothing. We already heard from policy. Negotiations, we had scheduled our initial meeting with the custodial union to begin the contract negotiations, and we had a scheduling issue, and it is needed to be rescheduled, so we will be moving on that shortly. I am going to skip the chair's report because I feel like you've heard it all. My work has been this agenda here, so you've seen it. Do people have topics for future meetings that they can articulate in a brief sentence? Vinny?
Recommendation on the treasurer.
Can you?
Recommendation on the treasurer for next time.
Okay, thank you. I think that was on my agenda, but I appreciate it being reiterated. Anyone else? Anna?
Sort of a follow-up to the retreat, but I would love to have us revisit the work plan. Maybe it's just a request for another workshop of some kind, but to look at the work plan and really get back on that. And that's one. The second one is the regional agreement, how we're going to address that.
Yep. Okay.
Can you ask Naomi if that's an executive session?
You know what? I can't hear you.
Could you ask Naomi if that's executive session or open session discussion?
I'm sorry, I still can't hear you.
Can you ask Naomi?
Yes.
If that discussion is executive session discussion or open session discussion?
The regional agreement conversation? Yes, I will ask her that question. Thank you.
Not a priority, but I think the impetus is there for us to do a real deep dive on the athletic fees.
Yeah, I think that needs to, finance is going to have to take that on this year. Yep, I agree.
So, and I would ask, Jen, that you either on your own or I'd be happy to do it with you. We might look at where that might fit in with the year. Given that work plan that Anna just mentioned, we might think about where would that fit the athletic fee conversation.
If I'm not completely out of my mind, we have to approve them seasonally, correct? Doesn't Craig come to us? Doesn't he set them season by season?
No, I think we did it annually.
We just did it. We just
it was
him
the structure, but he comes to us. But every season he would come and present the fees. He came to us like 3 or 4 times last year.
It was unusual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think, so thank you, Jen, and that is, I would love to have that conversation to make sure that we fit that in the appropriate place in the work plan for all of these. Anyone else? Great. As always, other topics for future meetings, you can always email me, and we can always, that can be something you can always submit those, and we can get them fit in where they work in the work plan. I think this is me, the agenda. I adjourn, correct? Okay. I'm going to ask for, I move to adjourn into executive session for purpose number 2, to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, interim superintendent. We have purpose number 3 here, but in all honesty, I'm not sure we're going to need it.
I think we should.
I guess we can do it in case we want to have discussion. For purpose number 3, potentially to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the AFSCME. And an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee, and not to reconvene in open session.
Second.
Seconded by Julia. Is there discussion? All in favor?
It's a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's good I have you guys. Okay, Michelle Horgan?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
David?
No.
Michelle Bailey?
Yes.
Okay, so that is 6 in favor and 1 opposed, and the motion passes. And we are adjourned into executive session.